pretty good hole, and we're able to get out of it. We've played good baseball now for a couple months. The guys feel good about where they're at, and I talked a little bit about it earlier. I feel like it's just now actually starting to click. I know we've played well for the last 6 to 8 weeks, but it's offensively it's starting to come together, and we're stringing together a lot more quality plate appearances. So continue to play good defense and do what we're doing on the pitching side, and then our offense, it's coming together. I feel pretty good about it.
That was Ollie Marmol over the weekend talking about where the Cardinals are at heading into the second half. The Cardinals have the best record in the National League since Mother's Day. It's a stat that's been cited a million different times, but I can't cite it enough because it is true. 35-22 over their last 57 games. The Philadelphia Phillies, who I think we all agree are clearly and definitively the best team in the National League. They're 34-22, so one fewer win. Same number of losses over the last basically 2 months compared to the St. Louis Cardinals. As you look around the National League right now and you think to how open this league is, I think the Phillies are the favorite. But after that, you look the same stretch of time that we've been talking about for the Cardinals now, which is 2 months of baseball. This is a pretty good sample size. The Diamondbacks are 31-26. Same record as the New York Mets. The Pittsburgh Pirates are 30-26 in this stretch. The Milwaukee Brewers, who lead your division, 31-27. So these teams are all roughly the same. After that, Dodgers only 2 games above 500, 29-27. Same record as the Giants. The Padres are 29-28. The Atlanta Braves, who the Cardinals start a 3-game series against tonight, 29-30. They are under 500 over their last 59 games. Alex, how does this influence, if at all, the way that you view the National League, where the Cardinals are at, and what the rest of the league has done basically over the last 2 months of the season?
I think it influences by looking at it as it's Philly and then everybody else. Now, the Dodgers, I understand why they are struggling because they don't have Mookie Betts, and when Mookie Betts comes back, depending on how long it takes them to get right, that one I could see improving a little bit more. But it's the Phillies and everybody else. And by everybody else, I mean Dodgers, Brewers, Braves, Cardinals, Mets, Diamondbacks, Padres,
Basically
Pirates.
Run through the whole list of NL teams.
And like I'm not investing as much into the Padres and Pirates for some reason. It's really the Diamondbacks and Mets that I think are the most interesting one of pushing somebody out of the wild card race. But it's pretty clear it's the Phillies and then everybody else. And everybody else is a exciting second half because you got like 6 or 7 teams that realistically could chase down a division crown or at least solidify one of those playoff spots and separate themselves from the rest. But just as much as I'm excited about it as a Cardinals fan, I also look at it and I say the Mets win 7-3 in their last 10 games. The Diamondbacks win 6-4. The Pirates win 7-3. And your pitching feels like it's going in the other direction, at least going into the break of the All-Star time. So as exciting as it is, it's also very nerve-wracking because just as much as I believe the Cardinals could catch the Brewers in the NL Central, I also believe they could fall out of this race because of the Mets, Diamondbacks, Padres, and Pirates.
Yeah, we talked, I think, yesterday on Believe It or Not, Cardinals would go 2-4 in their first 6 games back. 3 games at the Braves that starts tonight, 3 games at Pittsburgh. They go 2-4, they could somehow be looking up at the playoff picture. Yep. That's how tight this race is, and it shows how open the NL is to where I think it's going to come down to, and there's not going to be a lot out there potentially at the Major League Baseball trade deadline, who fortifies their holes the best. You know, I don't know if there's teams outside of Philadelphia that will try to raise their ceiling because I'm not sure a lot of teams in the National League want to push their chips in outside of Philly and the Dodgers. Who's the team that fills their holes that prevents that bottom from falling out from under them? Because it does take 1-2 bad weeks for you to all of a sudden go from being the second wild card to tumbling way down and potentially being a team that is looking up at the playoff picture. That's what that shows me, is that these teams are all super close still, even though we kind of feel comfortable in the Cardinals seat right now of, oh, they feel like a playoff team. We've seen them beat the Diamondbacks. We've seen them beat the Pirates. We've seen them beat the Mets. You feel comfortable, but it also is a reminder that, hey, it just takes a 2-week stretch of bad baseball, which we've seen this team's capable of, as we saw early on in the season, that you can fall out of it. You need to go to the deadline and fix your holes. That way you can prevent that floor from falling out from under you.
The Cardinals have scored 266 runs in their last 57 games. So this stretch of time that we're talking about where they're the best team in the National League, they've scored 266 runs in that stretch time. How many teams in the National League do you think have scored more runs than them? Because I feel like we all agree Cardinals' offense has been inconsistent at best, disappointing at worst.
I'll go...
It's a BK game, 3.
Yeah, I think it's probably more than that. 5?
4.
Oh,
4 teams have scored more runs than you in this stretch of time. The San Francisco Giants, strangely enough, have scored more runs than you over this stretch of games. They've actually played some decent baseball. The Phillies, 270, so not by much. They've played 1 fewer game, though, so, in terms of runs per game, scored 4 more and played 1 fewer games. They're doing a little bit better.
7 to their total.
Arizona's offense has been unbelievable. They've scored 290 runs in this stretch of games, and the best offense in this stretch in the National League.
They're the closest to 500 runs scored in the National League.
Their offense has been amazing. Their problem has been pitching, and they're getting healthy in that regard.
That's why they concern me.
That's team worth watching. The New York Mets have scored 300 runs since Mother's Day. Dude, it's unbelievable what's happening with them right now. So as you look around the National League, the reason I bring this up, it's just weird. There's just a lot of weird stuff that's going on. And so I think you guys are right. The next 10 days are going to determine so much because that's going to figure out, okay, where are you positionally within the National League wildcard race? Somebody's going to fall out. As I was going through some of the schedules yesterday leading into this year's trade deadline, you got a lot of teams that are bunched up right now. And you look at, for example, what the Braves have coming out of the break. Dude, they have this Cardinals for 3, and then Cincinnati for 3, and then at the Mets for 4. Coming out of the break. They are essentially going to determine what the deadline looks like for the National League wildcard race because they're going up against 3 of the biggest competitors in this race right now. You look at what the Padres, Pirates, and Cubs have coming out. Padres have 3 at Cleveland, 3 at Washington, and throwaway series there, and then 3 at Baltimore. So their next 9 games coming out of the break are all on the road, and they've got arguably 2 of, if not the best, maybe the 2 best teams in Major League Baseball right now with Cleveland and Baltimore. That ain't easy. Then you look at the Pirates, 3 against Philly, 3 against the Cardinals, and 3 at Arizona. There's going to be some distance in one way or another that gets put between these teams coming out of this break. The next 10 days are massive for what these teams are going to do at the deadline and ultimately how they shape things up going into the second half. There's a great piece earlier today by Derek Gould that I want to get to. We'll get to more on this coming up here in a moment, but he wrote about why the Cardinals are where they are right now within the division. So the Cardinals are 49-40 this year when they do not play the Milwaukee Brewers. The problem is they have played the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers are 49-41 when not facing the Cardinals. So they're essentially the exact same team when they don't face one another. Alex, you've brought this up a lot. You've mentioned this is why you can't trust the Cardinals to beat the Brewers, to win this division. The difference in this division right now is that when facing off head-to-head this season, the Cardinals are 1-6 against the Brewers. Boom, that's it. That is the entire difference between where the Cardinals are at and where the Brewers are at and why one of them is leading the division, and it is not your St. Louis Cardinals.
And if you just do that math for this second half, you're 4.5 behind the Milwaukee Brewers right now, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And let's say you go 1-5 in their final 6 games that you play against them. Well, now you're talking about being 9.5 games back. And if the Brewers just play the same way that they did in the first half, where you're a little above 500, you're not catching them unless you go on an unprecedented run in the second half. So
you got to win head-to-head. You've got to beat them.
And what you said about the Diamondbacks and the New York Mets, the fact that Diamondbacks are getting healthier, the Mets have figured something out, and I could see the Mets at least looking at upgrading at the deadline. It might literally be NL Central title or bust for the playoffs for the Cardinals, which to me is going to come down to you're going to probably have to win 4 of 5 when you are 4 of 6 when you take on the Milwaukee Brewers in the finale of this second half. That's how you get into the playoffs, it feels like.
Yeah. And I think, again, I still am skeptical of what Milwaukee is, even though we are at this point in the season and they do have the same record, essentially, when you guys don't go up against each other. But it just comes down to, does the offense hit? Because you think back to those losses against Milwaukee. I mean, they had 1 or 2 games where the pitching was not good for them. I think Michaelis had a game where he kind of blew up in one inning, but I think he settled down for the most part after that. Their offense wasn't hitting at that point. So what's going to be the separator against the Milwaukee Brewers? Sure, Cardinals are going to have to upgrade their rotation to get to October. We've talked about that. But it comes back to their offense. The offense is playing well now. Do you match up better against Milwaukee now that your team is now kind of all pushing together in one direction rather than early on in the season when it was like, hey, our pitching's really good. Man, don't look at our offense because it is brutal.
That's T-Bone. He's Alex. I'm BK. If you guys want to get involved in the show, the way to do so today is 314-399-9646. That is the Air Comfort Service text line. You can check us out on YouTube as well. As always, youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. That is where the Graveyard Chat is often running today. We'll get to Ask Us Anything at the end of this hour. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise. We'll get to those coming up at 11:45. But next, we did get some legitimate reporting from Derek Gould earlier today in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch about what the Cardinals are seeking at this year's trade deadline. We'll share that with you next year on 101 ESPN. Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch had some reporting earlier today, and he wrote about what the Cardinals are planning to do at this year's deadline, at least as of today. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Here's what Derek Gould said. Quote, "The Cardinals are shopping for depth and for pitchers, and they'll measure the market for a starter who upgrades their rotation. There are options, according to Derek Gould's sources. Past interest in Nathan Eovaldi could rekindle if Texas decides to turn into a seller. If the Cardinals are in the business of undoing previous mistakes," Gould writes, "Max Scherzer is a Ranger, though he recently told Foul Territory that he does not plan to waive his no-trade clause again. Angels All-Star lefty Tyler Anderson and White Sox right-handed pitcher Eric Fetty have reasonable contracts through the 2025 season. Toronto lefty Yusei Kikuchi could also be a rental, end quote. That's what Derek Gould wrote earlier today over in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. That matches up with a lot of the names that we have mentioned here on the show, Alex. It makes a lot of sense. The Rangers really determine, like, hey, what's the ceiling for the Cardinals this year at the deadline? And then the other guys that he threw in there with Tyler Anderson, Eric Fetty, Yusei Kikuchi, those are three of the names that really make the most sense for what the Cardinals are looking for at this year's deadline. I would throw Jack Flaherty into that mix as well. We talked about him a little bit yesterday. We'll talk about him more coming up at 12 o'clock. But that appears to me, based on reading that from Derek Gould, who is very plugged in with the Cardinals, that the Cardinals are going to be looking for a starter at this year's deadline. That's been kind of up in the air as to whether or not they would go that route or try to just bolster the bullpen. Do you think that's the right decision for them?
Yeah, I think so. I think bolstering the bullpen is also going to be very important for this team. But the bigger need, I would say, for the Cardinals right now is upgrading your rotation, because you're not fixing your offense unless you're going big hunting for a big bat, and I don't know where that plays. We've talked a lot about that. So the best way that you can upgrade your team and give you a realistic chance to win in a postseason series is to upgrade over Kyle Gibson and Miles Mikolas. So Sonny Gray starts game 1, trade acquisition starts game 2, and then one of Gibson or Mikolas starts game 3. If you bolster your bullpen, I think that's also the necessary way to go. But if I look at the names of Eovaldi, Max Scherzer, Kikuchi, Fetty, and I've changed my tune on Jack Flaherty when we talk about that a little bit later. I think those 5 guys are how you fix your team for a postseason.
We didn't bring up the 2 most important words in this for the Cardinals: all-star and lefty Tyler Anderson.
There's a reason why I didn't bring his name up.
He's in a separate category from all of the other pitchers.
Yeah, the category of you losing.
Yeah, if everybody else was traded before you got there, okay, now we'll hear the argument on Tyler
Welcome
Anderson.
to going to the Walmart $5 movie bin.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, he has been good this year. If you just look at the ERA, no, I'm being totally
How often have
honest.
you dug into that Walmart $5 bin and found Uncle Buck on DVD?
I'm with you. Like, Big Daddy's there. It's not even Big Daddy, though. It's just, you see Adam Sandler, you think it's Big Daddy. It actually ends up being Mr. Deeds.
Yeah, no, it's
this again.
It's a knockoff. It's called Big Padre. You've never actually seen Big Daddy.
So I'm with you. Tyler Anderson is that classic. What are you looking at? Are you looking at what he's done, or are you projecting what he's going to do, right? You don't pay for past performance. You pay for future performance. And that's hard to project, except we've gotten a lot better at projecting this stuff in Major League Baseball with the data that is now available to us. In everything about Tyler Anderson screams regression is coming. And that doesn't mean he's going to be bad, but I think it's very likely he ends up being more similar to like a Miles Mikolas for you. And that means a 4.5-ish ERA most likely in the second half of the season. And if that's what you want, cool. I don't think that really does a whole lot for what the Cardinals need. I would rather have Andre Palante start in that 5th spot and just stay as is without giving up anything of meaning than go out and make a move for Tyler Anderson, personally. I do think, though, that a lot of the pitchers that are available, whether it's Fetty, Kikuchi, Eovaldi, Jack Flaherty, even Zach Eflin to a degree fits into this category. They remind me a lot of what the Cardinals got in 2022. When you looked at, and I did this last night, I looked up a bunch of different numbers, innings, ERA, fielding independent pitching, strikeout rate to walk rate, ground ball rate, whip, hard hit rate, swinging strike rate, stuff, all these different things. When you look at what the Cardinals were able to acquire in 2022, the numbers that Montgomery and Quintana had put up prior to the deadline, man, they are really similar to what you have seen so far this year from Fetty, Kikuchi, Eovaldi, and Jack Flaherty. So if I told you right now, the Cardinals will acquire one of those 4 pitchers that I just mentioned, Fetty, Kikuchi, Eovaldi, or Jack Flaherty, and I said, you're locking it in, guaranteed, I've got a crystal ball, I can see the future, they will be the same in terms of effectiveness as like Montgomery / Quintana, who were kind of similar in terms of what they did for the Cardinals in the second half of that season. How, if at all, would that impact the way that you view the rest of this team in 2024?
It moves the needle for me in the sense of I think you're one of the best teams of the second tier in the National League if you acquire that, in terms of I believe you'll be a playoff team no matter what. You could seriously chase down the Milwaukee Brewers with that move, but it doesn't move the needle for me in terms of the playoffs. You've improved on the pitching. You've given yourself a solidified chance because your rotation now is not Gray, Gibson, and Mikolas. but it still comes down to your offense. And the offense, I just don't know if I could buy into in the playoffs. But you've locked down your rotation for a potential playoff series that gives you a realistic shot to win it.
I think you give yourself, if you can get the equivalent of those guys, to me, I'll go into the playoffs going, okay, you're probably not going to be viewed as a favorite in most of the series that you match up against, unless like maybe in the wild card round. But I can look at that rotation and go, okay, I can see how you get through October with it. As long as they've got swing minutes. They go Anderson route, I'm not going to even listen to it.
Yeah, it's different.
They get those guys that you're talking about, the Fetties, you get the Kikuchi, you get the Flaherty, Evaldi, guys that have some swing and miss in their game. Then I would go, okay, I can understand what they're going for. And I can look at the pitching, I can look at the bullpen and go, okay, that's the identity of the Cardinals for October. That's how they're hoping to get through October. And then it just puts the pressure on the offense. Does the offense find another level here in the second half? And if it does, okay, now we're back to having that conversation of this team might be able to do something and make some noise in October, because we've talked about it on this show. You need 3 big bats in your lineup. You need 3 studs in terms of pitching in your rotation, and probably 4 impact bullpen arms. And they've got the 4 impact bullpen arms, and can maybe even add another one to that list at the deadline. You get that second starter. Now you filled that hole, and now you just need someone internally to become that 3rd big bat.
Yeah, and I think they could have. Like, I looked back, and we'll talk more about this later on, but I looked back at the way that the National League pennant winners have gone about their rotation in recent seasons. And for the most part, they're starting 3 guys. Like, they're technically the 4th starter will get a start or 2 for you in the postseason, but it's like 1 or 2 starts at a maximum. So if you were to add Fetty, Kikuchi, Evaldi, Flaherty, those 4 guys, one of them, you're probably going into the postseason and saying Sonny Gray, whoever you start or trade for, and then most likely Kyle Gibson. That's your 3-man rotation. And there will be a start, maybe at a maximum 2, that you get out of most likely Miles Mikolas. You can win those games. You can go into a postseason, and if you tell me, hey, over the course of a month, can Miles Mikolas give you 1 quality start against a playoff team? My answer would be yes. I'm not going to predict it, but could Miles Mikolas get you 5 innings, 2 earned runs against a good baseball lineup? Yes, we've seen it this season. Like, I don't have to go far into his history to see that he can do that. You just need some good batted ball luck in one game. Baseball's weird. It happens. So if you get one of these guys, I'll say they have a shot in the postseason. And then it becomes a question of, what does the lineup do? And so much about this team just really comes back to, man, are you going to get more out of Goldie and Arenado? And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think the Cardinals know the answer to that question. I don't know how anybody could honestly know the answer to that. Goldie's underlying numbers are really good, but the production hasn't been there. Arenado's underlying numbers stink, but at least he's hitting for average. And you wonder, hey, was there injuries that they weren't leading on as much as what was actually there with Arenado? And that was sapping his power after a week off and some signs of life at the week or 2 prior to the All-Star break. Could we see a better version of him in the second half? I would bet against it, but it's possible. I think that you give yourself a shot by going out and making one of these kinds of moves. And I think to me, it's 3 guys. It's Kikuchi, Evaldi, and Flaherty. Those are the 3 that really give you a legitimate shot going into the postseason.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And honestly,
or sure, if you want to throw his name in there.
Because Burleson has emerged, I don't even know if you need one of Goldie and Arenado to become that bat you're talking about. It can be Newpart,
but I don't know
it can be Gorman.
I don't know if I'd invest all into Burleson.
I think you need one of them, though.
Yeah.
I think you need one of Goldie or Arenado, even if they're not back to like MVP form, to be really good contributors to your lineup. You need them to be legitimate 5-hole hitters at a minimum.
As we talked yesterday, I'm not being pessimistic. It's just I feel like you're going to have a dip off of Alec Burleson, and I don't know if he's going to be the same bat down the stretch and into the postseason.
And if that happens, then I agree. You probably do need one of Goldie and Arenado. But if Burley and Contreras are who they've been so far, I just need to look at that 5 spot that you mentioned there and say, okay, I don't have to squint to see it. Whether that's Newpar starts doing the peak Lars thing again, or if it's Nolan Gorman is hot for that 1-month stretch, or if it is Paul Goldschmidt gets back to that level. I just need to see one person that emerges in that 5 spot that I can go, okay, that looks like a 5-hole hitter. Okay, now you've got your 3 big boppers.
That's T-Bone. He's Alex on BK. Coming up next, Kiley McDaniel's going to join the show. He does great work over at ESPN.com and on the ESPN Major League Baseball draft broadcast. He talked a little bit earlier. We didn't know that the morning show was going to have Kiley McDaniel on today.
Thanks, Rock.
We had already reached out to him.
Behind people's backs.
Here we are. It is what it is. It happens. We've been there, done that. We've done this before. Sometimes wires get crossed. But Kiley talked a lot about the draft with them, so we're not going to touch on that too much with him. I want to look more at what the deadline looks like for the Cardinals and what their future outlook is right now. We'll talk to Kiley about all of that next year on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendrickson here with A Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight, the Cardinals start the second half of the season as they start a 3-game set at the Atlanta Braves. 6:20 will be first pitch, and Sonny Gray will be on the mound for St. Louis. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Kiley McDaniel's going to take up residency here in the city of St. Louis if he keeps doing these radio interviews. 2 in 1 day is pretty impressive. Kiley McDaniel joins us now. He's the ESPN Major League Baseball writer. He works on the baseball analyst side of things as well. You saw him earlier this week on the MLB draft broadcast for ESPN. Kiley joins us via the 101 ESPN hotline. We appreciate the time, man. How you doing today?
Well, not great in this moment because I'm driving to watch some 2025 high school draft prospects and I'm stuck in traffic and it's raining. So not great, but I think tomorrow will be a better day.
That sounds like my own personal hell. So I wish you all the best of luck with that, Kiley.
Don't let him fool you, Kiley. BK over here loves him some rain. Loves him some rain clouds.
I don't mind just like a light breeze, some rain on like a 75-degree day. That sounds fine. The traffic part of it, though, no, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, you're talking about a misting. That's a different experience than what I'm going through right now.
You got a light hurricane.
I hear those windshield wipers going right now.
All right, Kiley, let's talk a little bit. I know you talked with our morning show. We double booked you on accident, but our morning show went into the draft stuff with you, so we'll let them take care of that. I want to talk a little bit about kind of projecting forward with the deadline, if you don't mind, on what that could look like for the Cardinals, for teams across the league. Top line takeaways right now. How are you viewing this year's deadline? Do you expect a lot of activity?
So I feel like that's been the question going into like the last 4 or 5 deadlines in this sort of modern era. And the answer is usually there's some really big names and they would be huge trades and really, change the face of the playoff race. But they probably won't move because these teams are obsessed with being competitive every year and having a good farm system if they already have one and sticking to their plans. And then the thing that shakes that up would be when A.J. Preller gets involved or occasionally Mike Rizzo, where you get these sort of old school scouting guys that'll be like, well, Juan Soto, that's what I want. So, like, whatever it takes, I'll take Juan Soto. And this year I'm not sure that we'll say gunslinger, like, really exists. And so when you talk about the big names like the Tarek Skubal, Garrett Crochet, some of those kinds of guys, I don't think they move. I think it's more the really good rentals, maybe Jack Flaherty. Like, they're examples of that guy. And I'm sure you guys will ask this next, but I'm kind of curious what you guys think the Cardinals' positioning is, because I kind of have an idea, but you guys watch this team more than I do, and I'm kind of curious what you think they need and, like, what part of the market they're going to be dipping into.
Okay, so I think they're going to look for a starting pitcher. I don't know if that they'll get one, but I think that they're going to look for that depending on what the cost is, because you know how the Cardinals are, man. They are going to be, incremental upgrades. That's the way that they operate. I think they'll try to get a reliever. They always do that at the deadline, and then they'll check out the right-handed platoon bat option, preferably one that plays in the outfield. Those are probably like the 3 things on their checklist, and then they'll see kind of where they go from there. Out of curiosity, Kiley, because they're not going to do what I'm about to ask you about. If the Cardinals wanted to get in on the conversations for one of Skubal or Crochet, like, what does that kind of a package even look like? Because I think our audience loves the idea of adding, obviously, a frontline starting pitcher. I don't think a lot of people understand how much that would cost. So if the Cardinals wanted to put together a package, what do you think it would look like?
So for context, the last guy that we saw traded with 2.5 years of control, which is what Crochet and Skubal have, was Juan Soto. And so that was like, obviously like a better player with more value, but that was like 5 good young players. Like basically, I think it was like 3 guys in the top half of the top 100 and then 2 guys on the back half of it. So it's like very few teams actually have 5 top 100 players, much less ones that they can actually trade. And so I think Crochet and Skubal will be a notch below that, which is like 3 to 4 top 100 players or guys that recently graduated that were on the top 100 or, a guy that has had like a really good rookie season that isn't a prospect anymore, like that kind of guy. And so, for the Cardinals, that would be talking about, Victor Scott, Tank Hence, TK Roby, like those sorts of names. Get like 3 or 4 of those guys together, and the conversation has begun. And then it might be more than that if there's like a bidding war or they actually want to do it, because I would say Skubal is in a position where Detroit doesn't really want to trade him. I think they think he's going to be good soon. They're going to be good soon, and they're already going to lose Flaherty to free agency. Whereas Crochet, I think the White Sox are open to trading him, but they have 2.5 years, so they can afford to wait. So they're also not in a hurry. So I think both of those teams are in a position where there's not necessarily going to be a bidding war driving the price up. It's them not wanting to make the trade because they don't have to driving the price up.
So, Kiley, set those two guys aside because it seems like they're unrealistic for this Cardinals team to even consider. And then you get to the next crop of guys. You mentioned Jack Flaherty. We've brought up a lot Eric Fetty. You say Kikuchi is our guy, T-Bone's favorite pitcher right now available. Out of those guys, that next tier down, who do you think is the best that could help the Cardinals?
I would say Fetty just because I'm pretty sure he's going to get traded, and the only threat would be that if somebody like, say, the Dodgers want to make a trade for Crochet, I could see him getting Fetty thrown in as well because they obviously did that with the Scherzer-Turner trade a couple years ago, and they obviously have the ammunition to do it. I was actually on a group chat with our ESPN reporters talking about it, and one of them floated like, hey, I've heard that LA is open to talking about these 4 names, and I expect them to be not very good. All 4 of them are on the top 100, and I was like, oh, that's who they would need to trade. And he was like, yeah, maybe they'll throw Fetty in too. And I was just like, yep, that's the position the Dodgers are in. They can kind of get whoever they want. Whenever they want to turn those keys, they can get all those guys.
They're going to get Crochet, Robert, and Eric Fetty, aren't they, in the exact same game trade?
Why not? Go ahead and add that right in.
They literally could. They have a top 5 farm system, and it's like hitters, it's pitchers, it's upper, lower minors. They got young guys on the big league team. Like, they kind of have everything. And the way that teams lose this is if they do that 3 years in a row and then have a bad draft or two, then they run out of guys. They don't really do this. And you'll remember when Andrew Friedman came on, they let a bunch of guys walk, including like Zach Greinke and Manny Machado, and then they decided to dip into the 9-figure waters, and they grabbed Betts and then Freeman and then Yamamoto, and it looks like they went 3 for 3 on those guys. Like, they haven't signed a bad contract yet. So, like, because they're so good at that stuff, they now have the luxury of deciding to kind of move all in if they want to, and I kind of feel like every 2 or 3 years they end up doing that, and so, like, this could be that time. So you kind of have to live in fear that the Dodgers are going to take whoever it is you're actually looking at.
All right, so let's assume they don't do that, Kiley. They probably will because it's the Dodgers, and this is the way that things operate. We're talking with Kiley McDaniel of ESPN and ESPN.com here on BK and Ferrario. If the Cardinals were to look at the market and say, okay, we want a rental starter, and you say Kikuchi is one of those guys. You mentioned the name Jack Flaherty is another. What is the outlook this year for Jack Flaherty, in your opinion, at the deadline? Because we've talked about him, and it's a weird fit. It did not exactly end super well here in St. Louis between the two sides. What is his outlook as a pitcher at this year's deadline, and do you think he makes sense for the St. Louis Cardinals?
So if you take out the history part of it, I think he does. I think he's obviously like their kind of pitcher. I think he's turned the corner in a way that people have been waiting for a couple of years for him to turn the corner, and looks like he's in line for like the payday that I think he thought he was going to get either at St. Louis or after leaving St. Louis. And he is a rental. And so in that way, everything sort of lines up. But again, you guys may know this better than me. I don't know how bad it was or what these sort of social costs will be to doing that. And also, like, Eric Fetty has this year and next year, and you mentioned Kikuchi. Like, there are examples of guys that are, like, in the same area that don't come with that baggage. So I assume unless we see multiple reports like, oh, the Cardinals would consider trading for Flaherty, and he seems to be open to it, I sort of assume that's a thing that's probably not going to happen, even though that is the guy that, like, if you take away all of that history, probably makes the most sense as any single one answer to that question.
Speaking of history, Kiley, the Cardinals have a history of underwhelming at the trade deadline, and Tyler Anderson's name keeps coming up. Please tell me that is not an option that the Cardinals should pursue.
Right when you said that, I was like, oh, that's what they're going to do. I haven't thought about it yet.
Yeah, we know.
But that's exactly what they would do.
It's either that or calling Rich Hill in retirement and saying you want to come out.
Kiley, they're going to get Tyler Anderson, and they're going to trade for Kevin Pillar. They're going to package them together, and Pillar's... Yep, that's our reaction, too. That's going to be the right-handed bat, and they're over-the-hill pitcher that's got another year of control, that had a 2.9 ERA, but every peripheral says he's going to be bad in the second half.
The ARP card discounts on the rotation after that trade are just absurd.
I'm going to pitch you guys a new idea for this show, which is you bring me on to tell me stuff, and then I'm like the guest judge on like America's Got Talent.
Please.
And I'm actually not the expert bringing you information because you guys clearly know the future.
Yeah, well, if this was The Voice, I hope you're not turning that chair around yet in any of these situations.
Can you imagine if you turn around and it's the singing equivalent of Kevin Pillar? You're like, come on.
That was the anthem earlier this week, Kiley.
I don't know if we can joke about that anymore.
Yeah, come
We're
on,
reacting
man.
to cover. That's the question. Yeah.
I mean, it's, she's getting help that she needs, so I think we can joke. I don't know. I don't know what the rules are anymore. It's 2024. I hope she has nothing but success in the future. What would you think about Tyler Anderson as a playoff rotation pitcher, Kylie?
So he's in that like uncanny area where it's like this guy is definitely going to give you good innings during the year. That's what he's always been. I think he'll continue to do that. Do you feel good about this guy starting a playoff game? And are you terrified after his first pitch that like, oh, is this guy going to get bounced in 2 innings and give up 5 runs? Because like when you turn up the temperature on that kind of pitcher, are they going to perform? I think he's right on that line. Like it might work, but you could also say that about Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn. Like you might be able to say about Michaelis. It's sort of like, well, you have Sonny Gray and you need another guy. And if you go below the line or at the line where you're not sure that guy is a difference maker in the playoffs, I'm like, I don't know, let Tim Kent throw for a little bit. Like at some point, like let's try Jerpy. He throws from a low slot. That might work. I would almost be inclined to try the internal options, the Robies or, whoever it might be, or Libertor, or maybe do a bullpen game. Everybody goes, an inning or two. Like, I just don't think that the appetite has not been there from this organization to pay the cost, whether it is in trade or it's in free agency money, to get the guy that you feel really good about starting a playoff game where 2/3 of the time it goes the way you want it to go. You might win, you might lose, like maybe get one of the duds. But like Aaron Nola for $170 million, like that I would have felt good about. And they don't really want to do that. And Sonny Gray was in that weird spot where because of his age and some of the injury history and stuff, you could get him for a reasonable amount of a total guarantee to get a guy you feel good about. And I just don't think those opportunities come along very often. And if they do, it's usually a guy that, maybe doesn't have the reliability or the sort of impact that they had earlier in their career. So it's great that they have that one guy. But I just am skeptical they're going to get that second guy. And that will then put, I think, a ceiling on what they can do in the playoffs, unless you have the equivalent of the playoff goalie getting hot, where just all of a sudden Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson can't be touched. And now those are your second and third starters. You can just kind of, scroll all the way through the playoffs and simulate it all the way until you get to the, NLCS or the World Series. Like, that can happen. That's happened before, but I wouldn't count on it happening.
You just described basically the last 3 years of our radio shows, Kylie. Yeah. Like in a 1 minute answer.
Kylie, you're essentially a co-host right now.
That was what we've talked about for, and no, actually dating back to 2019.
Yeah, 2019 was the last time I think it felt like something different.
Well, St. Louis Sports Radio has been. So thanks for that. Appreciate it. You did it very succinctly, and now we have nothing to talk about for the next 3 months. So appreciate you, Kylie.
Talk some MLS soccer. Here we go, guys.
Please don't.
Whoa,
That's
touchy
not going
subject.
well either right now, Kylie.
Kylie, let's get into some Blues hockey.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah, I haven't followed it in years, but I think I might be able to name one. Actually, probably none of the players.
If I had to say, Kylie, life on the line, can you name a St. Louis Blue right now?
Give me
one.
Anybody?
Who you got? Current St. Louis Blue.
Don't say Brett Hull.
Ooh, yeah. I was going to say historically for sure, because I've been doing some Immaculate Grid. I know Gretzky played there, which I forgot about.
Me too.
Was Chris Pronger there? I feel like he was there. That's kind of the last era where I was really plugged into hockey.
All right, so Kylie McDaniel got his 30 years ago Blues hockey knowledge ready to go, and he's got his current baseball knowledge at all times. Kylie, we appreciate the time as always, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us. Hopefully we made the drive go a little quicker for you.
Grant Fuhrer, Al McInnes. I'm starting to run out of names now. Adam Oates.
There it is. You're in my prime right now,
90s.
Kylie.
Our afternoon show host, his name's Jamie Rivers. He played on those teams that you're describing, so he would have been very proud of your Blues knowledge.
Yeah, no, once the Lightning won that Stanley Cup right before the lockout, that's when I checked out.
Understandably so.
Kylie, appreciate the time, man. Enjoy yourself watching a bunch of prospects tomorrow. We'll talk with you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
See you, buddy. That's Kiley McDaniel, one of the best in the business. Always enjoy his time here on BK and Ferrario. If you missed his interview earlier today, you can also check that out. 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
So we all in agreement that the Cardinals are going to trade for Tyler Anderson,
Kevin
Pillar, and add a bullpen arm that you're underwhelmed by?
Yeah, it's going to be a 3-for-1 shop. Just get a bullpen arm from the Angels.
They do have a really good bullpen arm.
There you go,
If you just wanted to do one-stop shopping, kind of like the Rangers did a couple of years ago with the Blues, where they said, let's take a Tarasenko, a Mikkola, and we'll just go ahead and ride this off into the sunset.
There you go, man. That's all going to happen. So just get on board with it.
Worked out for the Rangers.
Did it?
I'm sure it'll work out for the Cardinals this year.
Are you talking the New York Rangers or the Texas Rangers?
No, the New York Rangers.
Well, they choked, I think, in the second round that year.
Maybe it'll be like the Texas Rangers then, when they got Jordan Montgomery and...
I think they only got one guy at the deadline, but that's fine.
No, they got Stratton. He didn't really do anything
did
for them.
Did he even make the World Series roster?
He was on the roster.
Was he?
I believe. I think he was on the playoff roster. So
Chris Stratton's got a ring then.
Uh-huh.
Well, you know what? I think the Cardinals should sell it. It sounds like they could get more on that market.
In all seriousness, I'm pretty worried about the deadline this year, if you want me to be honest.
You're the one who told me a couple weeks ago, Mosley got a lot of pressure.
Hey, you ended
cares
the segment,
about his legacy.
You ended the segment yesterday thinking Jack Flaherty was going to be a Cardinal, and now you're a little worried.
What happened?
Yeah, how'd that go, man?
I've just been thinking about it more, and like,
I've just been doing a lot of thinking.
Dodgers are out there.
Just a little worried.
AJ Preller exists. Just Orioles have like all of the pressure in the world to succeed this year. The Yankees finally have a good team that everybody thinks actually isn't good.
The good news is the Orioles won't trade for Jack Flaherty.
The Guardians are amazing, and they stink at pitching. So, like, all of the good teams need pitching, and they're all more aggressive than the Cardinals, and that just makes me a little worried that they're going to get Tyler Anderson.
I think you should be more optimistic.
I am genuinely optimistic about the current
Does
Cardinals.
it sound that way, T-Bone?
If they get a number 2, I will absolutely come on here the day after the deadline and say the Cardinals can do something in the playoffs. Like something more meaningful than what people expect.
I will absolutely come on here if they do that and say that the Cardinals can make the playoffs.
My concern is that they're not going to do that, and it's hard for me to feign optimism if they don't go get that guy that we're referencing here. Like, I think Jack Flaherty can be that guy. Now, there's a million other questions that would have to be asked if they go that route. But Flaherty could fit into that mix. I would even allow myself to dream on Yusei Kikuchi, who's probably best served as a 3, but it's kind of that conversation that we had about Jordan Montgomery when the Cardinals acquired him, where it's like, hey, the industry values him this way. He, production-wise, though, has been this, which is a number 2 or 3. If they can get that out of him, let's see. Jose Quintana, same thing, right? He's been really good, so could the Cardinals get something out of him, and he ends up being really good for them in a playoff mix? The answer was yes. They just didn't do anything else. I could dream on it. Just worried.
Could you dream on Tyler Anderson, though?
I can't.
Because Tyler Anderson, at that 2.8
I would rather them not make a move than trade for Tyler Anderson.
I would rather than play Palante.
Because that also affects what they can do next year, and the opportunity cost is, if you go get Anderson, you can't upgrade from that position next year. Like, you're locked into this current version of the rotation, and I think that would be bad. So, yeah.
So how are you going to feel when they sign Rich Hill?
Oh, that's fine. No commitment, man.
I would rather sign Rich Hill than go get Tyler Anderson. I'm not kidding.
I'm not sure I'm there, but
because Rich Hill's only going to be here the second half.
I don't want either of those dudes.
And then I can upgrade from that spot next year. I would rather do neither.
Just pitch Andre Palante.
Sure.
That's what I would rather do, if you're giving me those two scenarios.
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line. This is something that we do each and every Friday on BK and Ferrario. This one comes from the 314. Guys, would you agree that the sluggers of the 90s and the early 2000s were better than the sluggers of this era? I would agree that steroids are one hell of a drug.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, steroids are very entertaining.
Like, if you're asking me, hey, who did you think was a better slugger? Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, and Mark McGwire, or whoever your favorite home run hitter is today? Yeah, like the former. the earlier versions of this are better. They also had a lot of help.
Yeah.
I still would take Albert Pujols and Ken Griffey Jr. over anybody in today, too.
Yeah. I can't deny that, like, on paper, sure, their numbers tell you, like, they were better sluggers, but I don't know what they were without the drugs, you know? I don't know what they were without the steroids. And that's why I would understand why somebody might argue that. I would take the other side and say it's more impressive what Albert Pujols would have liked.
Sure.
Nolan or Kyle Schwarber's doing, guys that are clean compared to a guy that like Barry Bonds. Like, I'm not denying his batter's eye, but like, yeah, he had help.
If you're giving me the crop
he
of
was
players,
a Hall of Famer before the steroids.
if you're giving me a crop of players from the 90s and early 2000s, and then let's just say from late 2000s to now, I would take the 90s and early 2000s crop of players in terms of entertainment.
I think so much of that goes back to, like, this is a bigger baseball conversation. It's about the pitching. And I'm not telling you the pitching was bad in the 90s. I'm telling you there's more good pitching now than there ever has been before. The top guys in the 90s were amazing. And they could have worked this era. They would look different. Like, I think if Greg Maddux was throwing today, he'd be throwing 98 regularly. Yeah. It would have been a different training regimen. He would just be going more max velo all the time. So it would look different compared to what we saw back then, but they would be every bit as effective, in my opinion. The difference is there's just, like, I don't know the number of pitchers that were throwing 100 back then, but now there are a lot more of them, to put it mildly. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything from the 636. If you could steal any segment from another show on the station, what would it be? It's a good question.
Is it weird that I mean, I guess it's the lineup game, considering we steal it all the time.
Sure.
I was going to say,
borrow.
Everybody has their own specific segments that work for them. Like, I don't think we could pull off Ask Uncle Randy as a segment, but I don't think anybody at the station.
The name that we probably couldn't. It would be weird if any of the three of us were answering questions about
Ask Uncle Bone.
Randy.
You could go with that one, but I don't think any of the other shows could pull off Believe It or Not.
True. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of segments that I hear on other shows.
I feel like all three shows on the station are very different.
I'd take the gauntlet, but you guys don't like contests, or you guys don't like trivia.
If I was going to do a trivia, it would be
I'd do the gauntlet.
That one.
Yeah.
I think they do a great job with that, and I think that's entertaining.
It's fun. That's what I think is to me most important about a segment like that. Is as long as it's fun. Hey man, I'm here for entertainment, information. One of the two. If you make me think or make me laugh on the show,
I'm here for mostly. If I don't have to be the one who comes up with damn questions,
Dude,
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
You get fined? You don't show up to work?
Like, Take It or Leave It is such a St. Louis sports radio staple. I mean, it's no different than the stuff that we do, like Believe It or Not, In or Out,
it's completely
Better to
different.
Forget It.
Whoa,
They're all
man,
the same thing.
It's
Everything
different.
goes back to a buy or sell, right? That, like, Pete.
Ooh, T-Bone segment idea, buy or sell.
Around the Horn did the buy or sell stuff like in 2003. And that's essentially what every sports television segment has become since.
Oh, true or poo? Anytime I can say poo, I'm in. So, yeah, true or poo.
Somebody said you guys should do a segment called Ask Uncle Bone.
Ask Uncle Bone. That's what I'm saying.
Dr. T.
There you go. Dr. T. I think that had a very different connotation with it.
How are you considered Dr. T? Or did you, like, in your utter confidence say that, I could get a doctor, it's not a big deal?
Yeah. I've been watching House. I can solve a lot of cases now.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text
get a
line
brain test.
for Ask Us Anything. Guys,
I'm wiki-healthing it right now.
I'm powered through here. Do you think that the Cardinals could consider a trade with a contender similar to how Monty was a trade with a contender a few years ago? Both teams got what they needed. The Yankees got the center fielder. The Cardinals got the starting pitcher. I was thinking about this before the show, and I was supposed to ask this about Kiley McDaniel, and then we had fun with him, and I forgot. Do you guys think that the Dodgers would consider trading Bobby Miller? He's had a terrible year this year. He was amazing for them last season. He still has a ton of upside. T-Bone, text Kiley and ask if he was one of the pitchers that was.
Yeah, he can do that while he's driving in the rain right now.
He's clearly not moving.
Yeah.
He was moving. I heard a car
Would you trade
horn.
Jordan Walker for Bobby Miller?
No.
Would you trade Lars Nootbaar for Bobby Miller?
Probably.
Would you trade
still say
Nolan
no.
Gorman for Bobby Miller?
Yes.
I'd still say probably no.
I'd say yes.
I actually think
on
the
that
Dodgers are the one that would tell you no. And you know why? I want to go back to the comment that we had from Michael Gersh on opening day of like, why'd you guys build the rotation this way? Like, why not go for a Blake Snell, a guy that can be hurt or can just flat out suck? And he told us because we need guys at post because we don't have another rotation to rely on. I think the Dodgers like what they have because though he's not been good, if they had to turn to Bobby Miller, they could say, okay, let's see if it works again. And he's got stuff that you think will translate. So they can go out and they can sign like James Paxton, who I love. I think he's got great, now he walks the world for some reason, but he had great swing and miss last year. Was a guy that you know is probably going to get hurt, but can throw 120 innings that can be good. Chris Sale, guy that the Braves did, where it's like, okay, we have a rotation, guy with injury risk, we can bring him in with high upside. You can't do that if you're the Dodgers if you start to get rid of some of that pipeline that's behind the veterans that you have.
And if I'm them, I'm trading Bobby Miller, it's for a more established pitcher right now. It's not for a position player.
See, I think they can do two trades, right? Like they go get Crochet or Fetty or both, and make the move where they're trading out a Bobby Miller to get the bat that they're looking for. So it's essentially like a two-part deal, two different trades, but you're getting the pitching that you're talking about, but it's not for Bobby Miller necessarily. That being said, I think Bobby Miller would probably have to be a part of any deal where they're getting Garrett Crochet. I do wonder, like, as you look at their lineup, they don't really have a second baseman right now.
No.
If the Cardinals offered a Nolan Gorman in that scenario, I could see how that would be appealing
And they need outfield help,
to the
too.
Dodgers. Yeah, they could really use somebody that could come in and help them the way that Lars Nootbaar plays, for example. It would be interesting. It would certainly be an interesting proposition for the Cardinals. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, I don't think I would do it because of the uncertainty that exists with Bobby Miller, but that's an offseason move that I would look into.
I'm with you.
If they got to the offseason and they're like, hey, they're actually interested in doing something like this, I could just move Donovan to second base. Gorman gets traded, and now I've got Bobby Miller. It's uncertainty, but dude, the upside there is a number one potentially, and cost control for the foreseeable future. Coming up next, what is the best case against adding Jack Flaherty at the trade deadline? I want to hear from you guys, and I'm going to read you some of the Facebook post comments on our post from yesterday that the Cardinals could be interested, or could trade. I don't know if they're interested. Could trade for somebody like a Jack Flaherty at the deadline. We'll do that next year on 101 ESPN. Jack Flaherty is a hot rod of discussion, to put it mildly, here in St. Louis.
Polarizing.
Too. Yeah, a lot of cameras around Jack Flaherty. Polaroid.
Remember the Polaroids?
That being said, he's been amazing this year. He's fourth in Major League Baseball among all starters that have thrown at least 90 innings this year in strikeout rate. The only three pitchers ahead of him are Garrett Crochet, Tyler Glasnow, and Chris Sale. He has a better strikeout rate this season than Tariq Skubal or Sonny Gray, who's seventh in this regard, or Pablo Lopez, Hunter Green, Zach Wheeler. Some of the best starters, to Alex's guy, Logan Gilbert, 25% strikeout rate. Jack Flaherty, 32%. He's been incredible. And maybe more importantly, his walk rate is only 4% this year. Opposing hitters are batting .220 against him, and none of this is fake. All of the underlying numbers suggest, hey, Jack is back. He looks relatively healthy. His back, no pun intended, has been a bit of an issue for him at times this season. He's got a couple injections, but otherwise, the arm is healthy, and he looks like himself again. And he's been able to unlock the potential that we've known about for years here in St. Louis in his time with the Tigers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. The Fast Lane talked about this a bit yesterday, and I was actually surprised to hear this. They all agreed if the Cardinals want to go out and acquire Jack Flaherty, they would all be in favor of it. They said, hey, if that's the best guy you can get, go get him. Do whatever it takes to win right now. The clubhouse will work itself out. And they've got two former athletes, professional athletes that have been inside of locker rooms before. They said, hey, it'll work itself out. You'll be able to figure it out. Alex, what do you think is the best case against it? Because the numbers are all there. The production is undeniable this season. If you were just saying, hey, strip apart the history, just, hey, who's the best pitcher the Cardinals can acquire, realistically speaking, this year at the deadline? If Flaherty had no history here in St. Louis, we would all say that is the obvious candidate the Cardinals should do everything they can to go get him. But the history is what changes things. What do you think is the best case against it in your mind?
And frankly, I'm probably the better one to ask, because yesterday, if you heard us talk about it, I was against it. And I've had a change of heart, tune, because I was texting with a couple of different people who were around Jack and the Cardinals and said, like, that was really blown out of proportion in terms of him and his teammates. Like, the person that I spoke with said that he and Wilson Contreras did not have a bad rep together. That was blown out of proportion. That was my biggest pushback against it, was the locker room issue, because I've never been a former athlete. All I can go off of is just covering locker rooms, and you can tell when things aren't right. And it sure felt like these last few seasons, things weren't right with Jack and everybody else. It might be that it was more along the lines of Jack and the front office didn't see eye to eye.
I think that's true.
And Jack and the previous coaching staff didn't see eye to eye.
I don't have anything on that, but that feels right.
But this one, at least from the people that I spoke with yesterday, they saw eye to eye when they were together, and
I'm
the
very
teammates were
confident
there.
that he and Ollie saw eye to eye.
And I didn't
very confident in that.
The biggest pushback for me was Wilson Contreras front, because Wilson Contreras is going to have to be your MVP. And if those two can't get on the same page like they didn't last year, then that's a problem. But again, I was kind of put in my place yesterday about that, saying, no, that was total BS. Like, yeah, Jack made some comments and Wilson Contreras had some thoughts, but overall, those two were fine together. And the way that they painted it was Jack was a great teammate with his locker room. So for me, that was my biggest pushback, and now that I have a better understanding of somebody who was around it a lot more than I was, I'm all aboard it.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. We did get this. Somebody said, maybe Jack was humbled by everything that happened last year with Contreras. He did eventually try to walk it back. And then potentially he was humbled again by beating around after he was traded in Baltimore. I am officially intrigued. That is something that I do wonder about, because Jack Flaherty finally, at least theoretically speaking, is healthy. I do wonder if last year was something that he needed to become a little bit more grounded.
I think that was the moment for him where it was a realization of, oh, I can't act this way. When you're in one place for the longest time where you got free range, when you go somewhere else, you do get grounded.
And you think, hey, maybe it's them. Maybe they're the ones that are the problem here. And when he was traded to Baltimore, and it didn't get a lot better for him there, and the results looked pretty similar to what they looked like here, I do wonder if he had to look himself in the mirror and say, Dude, it's me.
Because he was the big man on campus in Baltimore, too.
He was the one they traded for.
But what I'm saying is everyone else around him on that roster were young players that were kind of up and coming, and he stepped in as a guy that had been here for a long time.
And he had been on teams that had had success in the past, and that team was a lot of young guys that had not experienced what it was like to be in a race in September and then ultimately October before. So they brought him in for a lot of those reasons, and it didn't work out for Baltimore or for Jack. And so I think when that happens, you probably do have to come to a realization of, hey, this didn't work. I need to make some changes. And from what I recall, some of the reporting around why he signed in Detroit, I think he explained this after the fact, where he had talked with the Tigers coaching staff, their analytics department, et cetera, and wanted to hear from them, what do you see in me? How can you get the most out of me? And that's part of what they sold him on is, we can do X, Y, and Z to make you a better pitcher, and we've seen that for him this season. We have got a lot of people on the text line that have said something to the effect of, he didn't like St. Louis. Why are you trying to bring him back? Alex, I don't know why this continues to be perpetuated, and I don't know, honestly, where it came from originally. It's flat out not true.
It's complete BS.
I don't know where it came from originally. I do think Jack has a personality that can rub some people the wrong way. As somebody that also has that personality, I can speak to it.
Man, there are so many St. Louis athletes that just tie into BK.
Bring them all here.
Man, we're going to have just a Ryan Suter jersey and a Jack Flaherty jersey.
Jack is super intense. He is very competitive. He's a bit surly. Some of his post-game answers, specifically to Derek Gould on the art of pitching, that kind of stuff, it can rub you the wrong way, and I get it. But Jack was really well-liked inside of that locker room. Mm-hmm. And Jack liked playing for a team that had the history of the St. Louis Cardinals. And Jack wanted to win. And Jack got frustrated when he was hurt and ineffective.
I think the part where people were...
And this isn't projection, by the way. This is coming from people around the Cardinals that said all of these things.
I think the part where fans have problems with Jack Flaherty was, one, his infatuation with the Dodgers. He spoke a lot about that because he's an L.A. kid. Sure. And then it was also the way he handled the arbitration system, how he was very outspoken about how he wanted the money that he deserved. And it felt like everybody heard that and said, oh, well, Jack's just going to want money and not want to stay in St. Louis. He was outspoken not just about baseball. He was outspoken about his personal beliefs. And I think that rubbed people the wrong way. Jack was a straight shooter, and it rubbed people the wrong way. But I feel like a lot of Cardinals fans had the problem with him when he was outspoken about his arbitration rights, basically saying, I'm going to get all of the money that I deserve. And they took that as, oh, well, Jack's just going to give the middle finger to St. Louis when he's a free agent and walk away.
And I think, he wanted to sign here in St. Louis as long as St. Louis offered him the money that he felt that he was deserving.
Absolutely.
You know who else did that? Yadier Molina. Yadier Molina went out and said, hey, if you're going to give me a market value contract, I'll stay here. But there was a point in time not that long ago where I wondered if Yadi was going to be back or not. And then they eventually gave him that 3-year, I think it was a $60 million contract, which was probably more than what he was, quote unquote, worth on the open market at that point.
You know who also
had to do it.
You also wanted that? Albert Pujols.
You know who also wanted it? Adam Wainwright. Adam Wainwright got paid in his final contract here in St. Louis.
Yeah.
It's like, if the Cardinals valued him the way that he wanted to be valued, they would have brought him back. They didn't in the offseason, and I've also seen this as a reason against it is, guys, if the Cardinals were willing to let him walk last year, why would they bring him back now? I think that one's the easiest question to answer. They let him walk because he was ineffective last year. He wasn't very good. There was some consideration, by the way, of keeping him at the deadline and just qualifying off for him and bringing him back this year. That was something that was under consideration up until the deadline, but then they got a good return, so they decided to trade him. The reason why you would bring him back now is because he's proven for, if you get to the deadline, basically 4 months, that he's a different pitcher than he was last year. So if you told me, hey, if the Cardinals knew this time last year, if the Cardinals knew that this was going to be Jack Flaherty's 2024 season, they would not have traded him. They would have qualifying offer him and brought him back for the 2024 season. But there was no way you could possibly know that. And they needed to change. They needed change in their rotation. Now they have more stability. Jack can be that rising tide lifts all boats type of a presence where he comes in, slots in as your number 2. He's not your ace anymore. There's not that kind of pressure on him. That is Sonny Gray. He could just be a really good pitcher. So that's the other thing that I would bring up is I don't think it's as bad of a look as some would make it out to be.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if you get a good pitcher at the deadline, that should be the goal.
Now, I'm still skeptical it happens because it
Agreed.
does feel like, and at least from my understanding, there were problems between Jack and the front office, and that's the part that I'd be very curious about if Mo could swallow his pride and go back down that path. But everything with Jack Flaherty, like, this is a different clubhouse than the clubhouses of years past. And I think a lot of people would look at it as, well, the years past had Yachty and Adam Wainwright. Absolutely. And nobody said anything because it was Yachty and Adam Wainwright. There are a lot more voices in this locker room now. And the Wilson Contreras front, which was my biggest pushback, I think Wilson Contreras now has a say in that clubhouse because of what he has done this season and the improvements he has made, and it's not going to be the same as last year.
A lot of people also are bringing up like the race / political thing, and that cannot go unsaid.
Yeah.
It has to be, because when he was here, our country was in a place at the time where there were a lot of conversations that were taking place nationally, and Jack Flaherty was more than happy to add his voice to those conversations. That is something for me, as somebody that I personally like when athletes are outspoken. It is just something that I like from my athletes. I enjoyed that about Jack. Even if I disagree, whether you disagree, agree, whatever your stance is on the political issues, I like when players have something to say. They have thoughts on something other than the game of baseball. I get how it can rub you the wrong way, though. I do. And that is just, that's who he is as a person. And you can take it or leave it. I can tell you, I don't think it was ever a problem within the clubhouse. I don't think that was ever an issue with the guys between the White Lines, because it wasn't something they really discussed between the White Lines. That's something he did on his own personal time. So I don't think that would be an issue either. I do want to ask Katie Wu about this coming up at 12:30. What is her belief on if the Cardinals would be interested in such a reunion, or if she thinks it would go over well? We'll talk about that with Katie Wu coming up at 12:30. Coming up next, though, the SEC today released their preseason media poll on how the conference will shake out in 2024. Where do they view Mizzou in the standings?
Number one.
We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN. All right, so SEC Media Days were this week, and the Missouri Tigers were prominently featured as one of the teams that people think have a real chance out of the SEC this year to get to the college football playoff with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex, today it was released. The media that attends Media Days down in Dallas this year for the SEC, they all get together and they put together how they think the conference is going to shake out. So they end up, it essentially serves as the AP poll of the SEC. As of today, the way that the media views the conference heading into the season is as follows. The best team in the conference, according to the media, Georgia. No surprise there. Number 2, Texas, the newcomer, potentially going to be going to the SEC championship game, according to the media.
That so much.
I think they've got a really good team. I just think their quarterback is the most overrated player in college football.
Arch Manning.
Yeah, he should be their starter. Number 3, Alabama. Number 4, this is where I think you could start making a case for Mizzou. I think the next 3 teams to me are kind of interchangeable. Number 4 is Ole Miss. Number 5, LSU. New quarterback, new receivers, legitimate questions there. Defense should be much better with Blake Baker. Miss you. As their defensive coordinator. Number 6 is Missouri. Number 7, Tennessee. 8, Oklahoma. 9, Texas A&M. Alex, as I've been kind of starting to think about what the SEC is going to look like this year, how many teams in the conference have a real chance to get to the expanded playoff, I think there will be 9 fan bases that believe going into the season they have a chance to make the college football playoff. Said it that way for a reason. I don't think there are actually 9 teams that have a chance to make it to the playoff. I think there are 9 fan bases that believe their team has a chance.
That was a tone problem.
I do not think that Oklahoma has a chance. I do not think that Texas A&M has a chance this year. I do think that each of the top 7 have a chance, and that includes Tennessee, but I think the tier stops after Missouri of teams that really can convince themselves and should have the expectation going into the season that they will reach the college football playoff. I think Tennessee is in a tier of their own. If their quarterback is as good as advertised, they'll have a shot. Because Josh Heupel's a really good coach. He's going to get the most out of the offense. They've got a ton of talent across the board. They'll be good. I just don't know what the ceiling is until I see what their quarterback is like. But Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, LSU, Mizzou, those to me, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this, are the 6 teams that enter the season college football playoff type of expectations.
Yeah, I agree with that. And LSU's the one that's interesting for me. I think I'd put Mizzou a little bit ahead because you're moving away from Jaden Daniels and bringing in a new quarterback. But, until I see that, you'll put it out there. But I'm with you. I think those are the 6 teams. If you're the SEC, it's playoff or bust, especially with the expanded postseason. And you're talking about, I think, 6 juggernauts that will be playing against each other and going up head-to-head in terms of making it. And then beyond that, I think that's where you start to talk about the, could get in possibilities.
Yeah, I agree. I would hear an argument on Oklahoma, for example, to being kind of that second tier, but it's so hard for me when they lose their quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, who transferred to Oregon, if I remember correctly. Yep. And you've got Venables as a coach, which I like Venables as a defensive coordinator. I don't know how great of a head coach he actually is. I still think there's some left to be proven there, but I agree.
He's a bad head coach.
I'm not there yet,
I think he should be fired after this year. Wow, I'm out.
Who's worse, him or Quinn Ewers?
Oh, Quinn.
Boy, first time he plays a college football game, first thing he's doing is putting Arch Manning as QB1 on Texas.
Correct. Oh, absolutely.
In fact, I'm actually dropping Texas.
Does Texas and Mizzou
I'm actually dropping Quinn Ewers. I'm telling him go somewhere else.
I don't think that's a thing.
No, it is. He's gray shirting for us.
Does Texas and Mizzou play each other?
No, not this year.
Man, because I would be the biggest Texas fan if they did. I will be the biggest Texas fan just to root against BK.
Yeah. Mizzou does play Oklahoma this year, and that's a game that is on my birthday, and I will be in attendance. That is the number 1 game that is highlighted for me. Mizzou stole their offensive tackle. They think that it was because Mizzou tampered. They didn't. Oregon did. And
we just joined.
We just said, well, other teams did it.
Oregon said, hey,
we want to do it.
You come here and we'll give you X amount of money. And Mizzou was like, oh, yeah, talk to them.
Same.
And then he entered the transfer portal. And Mizzou was like, yeah, we'll beat that. And they did.
And they said, we didn't tamper.
And
somebody else
at
did.
Mizzou. So that's the way that went.
God bless you, Eli Drinkwitz.
They're good at this.
Legal, but
and Mizzou beat Oklahoma for like 7 different recruits over the last 3 years, including Luther Burden. So
you seem like you got a little bit of like attitude problem.
I hate Oklahoma.
From your days in the Big 12.
Yeah, I absolutely despise Oklahoma. One of my favorite wins of Mizzou history was when they beat Oklahoma at home, number 1 team in the country, in 2011, I guess it would have been. Game day at Mizzou, beautiful, beautiful thing. So yeah, Mizzou to me is clearly ahead of Oklahoma. Brent Venables terrible.
I'm making a list of teams I might root for this season against Mizzou just when BK is.
I'm so excited.
The fandom.
I'm so excited.
We can do this team like lays an egg and only win 7 games.
No, not happen.
Okay.
One of the reasons, by the way, like as much as I don't like Quinn Ewers, one of the reasons that I believe in the following 5 teams the most in the SEC is because of their quarterback situations. Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, Mizzou. Those are the 5 that I trust the most because I've seen their quarterbacks play before. LSU, big time change of the position. Tennessee, big change of the position. Same thing for Oklahoma. Texas A&M, you saw them a little bit last year. I just never trust Texas A&M.
Yeah.
The stock that exists for A&M at the beginning of the season, if I could just sell my Texas A&M stock and then buy at the end of the year for the next year to sell it again, that's what I would do.
I'd agree with you there.
Because they always end 7-5 or 8-4. They're going to cost somebody a chance at the college football playoff. I just don't think they're going to get into the college football playoff. Coming up next, Katie Woo here on 101 ESPN.
Taylor Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals start the second half of the season tonight as they start a 3-game set at the Atlanta Braves. 6:20 will be first pitch as Sonny Gray will get the start for St. Louis. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, let's go out to the 101 ESPN hotline. It is not a Monday, but Katie Woo joins us on the beginning of the second half of the season for the St. Louis Cardinals. You can read all of her great work over at The Athletic, and you should be following her on Twitter at Katie J. Woo. Katie, much like the Cardinals, has been refreshed, recharged with a little bit of vacation heading into the second half. Katie, how you doing today?
Right, allegedly. I am good, guys. 66 games to go. Very interested to see what these Cardinals will do. They've notoriously been a second-half team, so certainly some excitement heading into the second half, but a lot of work remains to be done.
Katie, let's start here. To you, the biggest storyline for the Cardinals in the second half of the season is what?
Minus the trade deadline.
Sure.
The biggest second-half storyline is Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado figuring it out. If this team does that, I don't think there's much to worry about. I think the Cardinals are, dare I say, the easy choice to win the division. If Goldschmidt and Arenado put up the numbers that they did in the first half, they have a glaring problem. I think there is a lot of pressure on the cornerstones to produce, maybe not even necessarily to where they were in 2022, but to just be better than what they were in the first half. That's ultimately, to me, going to dictate this team's overall success.
Can they survive the second half if Goldie and Arenado do hit like they did in the first half and not any better?
They can, right? Because you look at what they did in the first half, and you had a lot of guys step up. We've talked about Alec Burleson. We've talked about Mason Wynn. Defensively, Michael Ciani is, a Gold Glove center fielder, in my opinion. So they can win without Goldschmidt and Arenado putting up production. But they're not as big of a threat, obviously. And when you're looking at the glaring holes for the Cardinals roster, Wilson Contreras cannot pace this right-handed offense by himself. Mason Wynn does a nice job at the top of the order. Burleson, a lefty bat. Cardinals have a ton of those. But if you want your heart of the order to produce for you, that has to come from Goldschmidt and Arenado. Virtually every projection for the Cardinals entering the season did not anticipate them being successful without Paul and Nolan stepping up and carrying the offense. Those projections at this point seem to be a little off. Again, the Cardinals can win without them. They've shown it. But they're 100% a much more strong team when those two bats are clicking.
All right, Katie, we have less than 2 weeks remaining. You said other than the trade deadline, the biggest story for you, Goldie and Arenado. The trade deadline is less than 2 weeks away at this point. For you, based on whether it's reporting, talking to people around the club, just your own eyes, and you see what goes on with this team, what do you think the Cardinals will or should add as we get closer to the trade deadline?
What I think they will add, I think that depends a little bit to what we just talked about. If Goldschmidt and Arenado come out of the second half and they look better and the production is better, and again, less than 2 weeks is really not that much of a sample size, but it will be enough for the Cardinals to make a decision. They probably won't feel the need to go get a right-handed bat, and they can focus their attention to pitching. Mo has said this before. He told this to me in June. He said it throughout his career. Competitive teams are always looking to acquire pitching at the deadline. I would imagine this rings true for the Cardinals. Again this year, you can make the argument, I 100% agree, they need one more starter to shore up that rotation. I would also, think maybe they look at the bullpen. It's been great this year. To me, it's why the Cardinals have been really successful in the first half. One more arm to pair in that high leverage role, I think, would do wonders for a bullpen that is hoping to compete in the postseason. But right now, I think it depends on what Goldschmidt and Arenado do in the next 2 weeks and also what the market looks like. This is a really weird market this year. It's always a seller's market. We know this. But because there are so few true sellers, because especially in the National League, basically 10 teams are still somewhat in playoff contention, it really drives up the demand for any potential buyer. The Cardinals, and this isn't even a Mo thing, this can go back to ownership, have always been conservative at the deadline. To me, I wonder, I hope not, but I wonder if that is going to sway the Cardinals from being a little bit more aggressive at the deadline, because we know this, They simply aren't going to overpay at the trade deadline.
And that was where I was going to go next, Katie, because it does seem like that if you want to get one of these starting pitchers, because that to me seems like the necessity for the Cardinals, you're going to have to pay a bigger price because of so many teams that are looking to also upgrade and so little willing to trade away pieces. And I just don't believe the Cardinals are going to be willing to pay the price that it's going to cost to get those guys.
I don't either, and that's not just this year. That's just how they've operated in general. I mean, say what you want about Mo, but when you think about his last few trade deadlines, the names that he's acquired at the deadline haven't always been like the flashy blockbuster names. Most of the times you're like, okay, that does sound like a Cardinals trade. But the majority of them have helped them make postseason run. You're thinking of John Lester in 21. Who would have thought that would have helped? You're thinking like Jordan Montgomery and Jose Quintana, instrumental pieces in 2022. I think the Cardinals, you guys can stop emailing me about Garrett Crochet. That's not happening. Please stop. Okay, they're not.
We don't even bring up his name, Katie. We talk about the deadline like 3 segments every single day, and he's not even somebody that really comes up for us.
Tarek Skubal's probably more likely.
Another one we don't bring up at all.
Also no, right? But they're not looking to acquire top names. They're looking to acquire rotation depth. They like what they've seen out of Sonny Gray and Kyle Gibson atop the rotation, and I understand. I think those 2 acquisitions have been super impactful for this club. They're looking for someone to slot in like the number 3-ish range. You're looking at teams like maybe Tampa Bay that could trade from their surplus of starters. The problem is, as you guys know, starting pitching is always in demand. So even these middle range rotation arms are going to cost a lot, and it just remains to be seen what the Cardinals are comfortable with dealing, or if they think that they have enough on their current roster to still make a run.
All right, Katie, let's talk about it. So as I got into some of the numbers over the past week, now you've got some room to explore, right? We've had the All-Star break, so I was like, all right, let's start looking towards the deadline. There's one player that has very clearly been the most effective pitcher so far this season. And this might even include Garrett Crochet, honestly, if you look at some of the underlying numbers and how they're going to be utilized down the stretch. Because Crochet, there's a chance he's going to be shut down and have to go to a bullpen role because of the innings.
Sure.
Guy with a 3.1 ERA, 32% strikeout rate, a whip below 1, swinging strike rate that is up there with the best in all of Major League Baseball. Nobody's hitting him hard. He's got a slider from hell. Velocity's up. He started 16 games. He's relatively healthy. His name's Jack Flaherty. Is that something you think the Cardinals would consider?
I wish you could see my face right now. No. There's zero. The Cardinals are not going to bring back Jack Flaherty as a rental. He's having a great year, and this is nothing personal to Jack. This is nothing personal to the Cardinals. It's nice to see the success that he's having with Detroit, and I'm sure if the Tigers decide to trade him, he will be one of the most sought-after arms because of the fact that he's on a expiring contract at the end of the year, and because he's just been really good. But there is no way John Mozeliak is trading for Jack Flaherty. There's zero way. And it just, when you think about what the Cardinals have built in their clubhouse, I'm not saying Jack doesn't fit in, but I am saying like they really like their core, they like their rotation, they like their group. I know they catch a lot of flack for their veteran heavy breed old rotation, but it has really worked out in the exact ways they thought they had. Going to trade for Jack Flaherty, knowing that his relationship with Mo wasn't always the best, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Again, nothing personal to either side. Sometimes it's just better if both parties move on, and I think that's exactly that's happened with Flaherty here.
I think you're right. I will ask a follow-up on this, though. And the reason why is because...
Of course he will.
No, I think we've both... Katie, we've talked with people around the organization, not named John Mozeliak, that are like maybe more intimately involved in the day-to-day within the clubhouse, right? And most of the things that I hear about Jack as a teammate were really positive, right? The guys tend to like him. They think he's super intense. He's a big-time competitor. Coaches liked him. He always just wanted to be the best player possible. But it was the stuff with the front office that sometimes went a little bit awry, and they didn't always see eye to eye, to put it mildly. Couldn't I make a case, though, that like if this dude is the best pitcher that is available to them, and I don't know that it's going to cost a ton because he's a rental, right? And the rental prices are always a little down compared to players that are controllable for another year. Isn't that something where you could make an argument that Mo should set some of that stuff aside and say, hey, if this is the best way for me to improve my team, we've got a really good clubhouse, we can deal with this. This is something that we should consider. Is that an argument that holds water in your opinion?
Well, to be fair, I don't think that Mo was basing his decisions on the team based on personal vendettas that he may or may not have with any other player, right? He's not like, I don't like this guy, so no. I do think that on paper, if you're just looking at the stats, the numbers, the metrics, you're looking at, and the contract, of course, you're like, yes, that is the ideal rental pitcher. But chemistry matters too. And with Jack, there's just so much history here, not all of it good, that I'm not sure bringing that back into the clubhouse would really satisfy what the Cardinals are looking for. Also, like a small thing, they don't have a left-handed starter at all, and I'm not sure what you can count on with Steven Matz. I do think that if they're targeting
for
they're going to trade for Tyler Anderson.
Don't say Tyler Anderson, Katie!
No, I actually don't think they'll trade for Tyler Anderson.
Really?
He does make sense.
Who's the lefty then?
You say?
See, that's the problem. That's the problem that the Cardinals are running into. There are just not a lot of options at the moment.
Rich Hill's a lefty. Oh, crap.
Yeah,
Rich Hill's a
that.
lefty. Oh, no.
Katie, in all seriousness, you say Kikuchi's the guy they've got to go out there and acquire, right?
That is one name that I would be interested to see if the Cardinals are tapping in on, because, I mean, the Blue Jays, kind of similar to what the Cardinals went through last year, just spiraled out of nowhere. They're in a weird position where they weren't expecting to sell, and now all of a sudden it looks like they are. That he looks like a guy that I think the Cardinals would check in on, but that remains to be seen. I do not feel that way about Jack Flaherty, in case that wasn't clear.
Yeah. No, you made that
I didn't
clear.
get that, actually. So, Katie, can we keep following up on that? Is that cool?
Katie, do you still think that they're going to be looking for a right-handed outfield bat?
I do. Unless, the Cardinals, Ollie Marmol in particular, have been so adamant that if Arenado and Goldschmidt just get a little break, that they'll be fine. And these are two guys that aren't going to ask for a break in the middle of the season, obviously. So they're counting on the All-Star break resetting both hitters. And like we talked about, if Goldie and Nolan come out and they start looking like their old selves, I think it maybe releases some of the pressure to find a right-handed outfield bat. But if it looks kind of the same, if the at-bats are looking like the same quality they were in the first half, if the batted ball metrics aren't matching up, then I do think they'll find a right-handed outfielder bat first. They aren't looking to replace Siani in center field. He's more or less the starting center fielder. They could platoon center field in a way where they don't start Siani against lefties and then use that right-handed bat they acquire and then put Siani in as a defensive replacement. There is a way to do it, but the emphasis here is the right-handed bat option. Outfield is just the easiest way to slot said player in if they do acquire that.
Interesting. Hey, Katie, we appreciate the time as always. We'll certainly have more of these conversations as we get closer to the trade deadline. Got another couple of conversations with you before then. So we'll be reading all of your great work over at The Athletic. Enjoy yourself out in Atlanta for the rest of this weekend.
You got it, guys. We will talk next week.
Absolutely. That's Katie Wu joining us as she does each and every week here on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate her joining us on a Friday, normally on Mondays, this week on a Friday because of the All-Star break. Alex, I understand everything that Katie just said there, and hers is based upon reporting. So, I'm going to guess the Cardinals probably aren't going to go out there and acquire Jack Flaherty. Fair. Understandable. I would be curious, if you asked Ollie Marmol, for example, hey, here are the 4 pitchers that we're potentially looking at. And you said the pitchers that we're looking at are Yusei Kikuchi, Eric Fetty, Jack Flaherty, Zach Eflin. Those are the 4 arms that we have available for you. The prices, let's say they're somewhat similar, right? And it's not about acquisition costs. Don't worry about the contracts. And who do you want? Just purely, who do you think gives you the best chance to win in the playoffs? I think he would say Jack Flaherty. I think he would tell you, I believe the best way for us to get through October is with Jack Flaherty as a part of our rotation.
That's great, but he's not the one making the phone calls to make the trades. And that's why, and I'm not saying that to be a you-know-what. I'm saying that because Katie is on the same mindset as I am. Mo's the one making that deal, and the problem didn't seem to be between Jack and the clubhouse. It was Jack in the front office.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't think you get it.
Sometimes it's just Katie does. We talked earlier about what is the best argument against adding Jack Flaherty. Sometimes the argument is it's just best for everybody involved to go their separate ways.
I agree.
Sometimes there's a marriage where the two people fell in love. They were the best of friends, and they fell in love, and for whatever reasons, they drifted apart.
It was like the Blues and Mike Hoffman. They fell in love for an offseason, and they're like, oh, this is a bad idea.
That was a fling. That was a one-night stand. Both sides didn't realize what happened. They got pregnant on the first date, and they realized, oh, no, we're stuck together. Tried to make it work for a year, and then they decided, you know what, we're just going to co-parent.
We're going to do this. We're going to work together, and we're going to make
That's
this.
Not fair. They didn't get they got a dog. They got a dog on the first date. They didn't even get a dog.
They got a fish. They got a fish. It's easy to split from a fish. The Blues just flushed the fish down the toilet and said, we're done. We're done here.
That was them. The Cardinals and Jack got married.
Yeah.
And then realized this is not working. They tried to make it work for the kids and realized, like, hey, it's best for everybody involved if we just go our separate ways. And I'm saying, hey, what if we came back together? And decided to live together
Can I
again?
push back on, like, yes, that happened. But if I'm John Mozeliak, one, if there was an issue between Mo and Jack Flaherty, and that could be what could potentially hold this back. Because, again, I don't think it's much of a locker room thing. And if they are worried about locker room chemistry, you brought the old guys in to take care of that problem.
It's a fair retort. I do believe that.
I'm not going to listen to that argument. Like, that one is, okay, Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynch, your whole purpose here is to make sure that doesn't happen. But the reason I bring up the Mo and Jack Flaherty one, and I don't know if this is true or not, but if there is some issues there, Doug Armstrong, the best move he did this offseason was admit he made a mistake and traded Kevin Hayes. So if I'm John Mozeliak, I'm saying I'm going to go get him. There should not be any headbutting in the second half, because the reason there was headbutting in the past during this marriage was the Cardinals were saying, here's how we want to take care of Jack Flaherty. We want the asset to be valuable. We want him to be healthy. And Jack didn't agree with how they were handling him. There should be no handling restraints once you trade for him in the second half. It should be, Jack, you're starting every fifth start for us. Go out there and shove. We don't even have to have a contract negotiation when you get to the offseason.
Exactly.
We can't even put a qualifying offer on you because we carded you at the deadline. Go be Jack Flaherty.
A lot of the issues that did exist in the past shouldn't exist this year because of the situation that is very different. Because the Cardinals would not be eligible to qualifying offer him in the offseason because he would be traded here as opposed to him being here for the entirety of the season. So he doesn't have to worry about what his contract is going to be long term. Just about, hey, go out there and try to earn the most money possible. It's a mutually beneficial situation for both sides. If Jack goes out there and shoves, it's good for him for his future contract outlook. It's good for the Cardinals for their immediate success of the team. Somebody on the text line from the 636, and Alex, it looked like you had one more thing that you wanted to add on this as well, said, I feel like every fan has been telling you guys the Cardinals are not going to trade for him, but you wanted to fight it. But now that you hear Katie Wu say it sounds like it's not a possibility, you're done with the Jack trade possibility. We will continue talking about it. And the reason why is because of the people that are very likely to be traded at the deadline, he is inarguably the most realistic option that is also a legitimate front-end starter this year. Eric Fetty, you can squint and talk yourself into him being a front-end starter. He's a 3. He's a good 3, but he's a 3. Yusei Kikuchi, you could talk yourself into it. He's a 3. Nathan Eovaldi, you could probably talk yourself into it. I just don't know if he's actually going to be available. Zach Eflin's a 3. Jack Flaherty has the upside of a 2 or a 1, and he's pitching like that right now. And you don't have to squint. You don't have to talk yourself into it. Every piece of data suggests that. So that's why we'll keep talking about it. But, yeah, like when Katie tells us not going to happen, it's something we have to take into consideration. Katie's super plugged in.
The one other thing that I wanted to say is, like, go to the player's perspective, too. And I know he has no say in where he gets traded. I'm mostly under the belief that sometimes a player doesn't become that unless he goes somewhere else.
Sure.
I don't know if Jack is this if he stays in St. Louis. And I don't
think he would have been that if he had been here previous. I
don't know if he is that if he comes back.
Huh.
I feel like you go to Detroit where there's not a whole lot of pressure and you perform. And I'm not saying Jack can't handle the pressure because we've seen him do it in the past, but I don't believe Jack Flaherty is this pitcher if he gets acquired by the Cardinals at the deadline. I think you have some type of drop-off.
I would believe that if I didn't see second half 2019. You know, I've seen him be what he's doing in Detroit as a Cardinal. And you know what he was then? He was healthy. You know what I think he is now? I think he's healthy. You know what he wasn't the last couple of years when he really struggled and was really starting to potentially push the front office the wrong way? I don't think he was healthy.
That's the bull case. The bull case is he's healthy, and the problem over the last few years is that he wasn't healthy. Yeah. I think there's a lot of Carlos Rodon here, and that's twofold. One, you want the 1-year contract where Carlos Rodon is healthy and he's succeeding. You want that guy as a part of your rotation, and when he was that, I think he won the Cy Young that year, right? Or he was at least top 3, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. What you don't want is the Yankees version of Carlos Rodon, where he signs a long-term contract and he gets hurt again. That's what you don't want. And right now, he's on that 1-year deal. He's successful. He's healthy. This is the time when you want to be in the Jack Flaherty business. And he's trying to earn his next deal. This is a really good time to acquire him. The team that's probably going to do it is the Dodgers. They're going to get him. They're going to get Garrett Crochet. They're going to win the World Series. It's going to be crazy. Coming up next, the Junk Drawer here on 101 ESPN. All right, boys, a lot of the time we'll get into something completely non-sports related for the juncture. Today I want to keep it a little bit more on the rails. Let's talk a little bit of college football because the SEC released their preseason media poll, which comes out every year right after media days. They've got Georgia winning the conference this year, Texas finishing second, Alabama third, Ole Miss fourth, LSU fifth, and Mizzou finishing sixth. What I wanted to ask you is, if you could go, because I love doing this. I haven't been able to do it as much lately because I was doing a bunch of writing for Rock M Nation. But I do want to do more Mizzou road trips in the SEC where you're going to the opposing stadium to watch your team. If you guys could go to an SEC game this year, what would you want to see in person? Like, which stadium would you want to go to? Which teams would you want to see? Even if they're not playing this year, but like you're thinking down the road, what is the matchup that you would want to see, and where would you want to go watch that game?
We're going off of like matchups or like the stadiums that we'd want to see?
It's all the above, right? Because it's a combination.
Yeah.
It's one thing to go to the big house, but it's a little different if you're going to see Michigan versus
Illinois,
Southeast Michigan State Tech. T-Bone's going to that
Illinois.
game.
Yeah, I'm going to Illinois, Michigan this year.
No, not even the good one. You're going to
that's
Illinois,
Champaign.
Michigan. That's not
Whatever.
even enjoyable.
Clearly, the answer is Vandy versus Mississippi State.
At least you're in Nashville. Or
Yeah.
unless you're going to Stark Vegas.
Yeah, well,
I think mine would probably be LSU versus Mizzou in LSU.
Man, that's one that is on my bucket
I've
list.
always wanted to go to New Orleans, and I mean, especially when you're talking about Baton Rouge, to where you could see that type of game. It's either that one or the Swamp versus the Gators.
Sure.
That's another one
That's
that
what
I'd
I
love
was
to go
thinking
see.
of.
Like I've heard the tailgating for that is just unbelievable.
I want to wait till the Gators are good again, and then
That's
when
smart.
they are, like when they're a team that's like potentially in the playoff, I'd love to go into the Swamp. I want to go see whether it be at Alabama or Georgia. I don't care. I'd love to go to that game, Georgia versus Alabama. Pick the stadium. Don't care. Me and my dad have talked about, I don't think we're going to do it, but we talked about getting tickets for when Missouri goes to Alabama this year. I don't think we're going to do it, but I would love to go to that
It's
stadium.
such a cool game to go to, man. I've been to Ole Miss. It's a great, great atmosphere. If you have an opportunity to go down there and tailgate
That's the other
beforehand,
one, yeah.
it's amazing. I'm with Alex. I'm going to Baton Rouge, man. Tennessee, by the way, another stadium that is incredible to attend. It's massive. It's so much different than anything I've ever experienced. If you've been to the Big House, I've never been personally, but I would have to
That's
imagine
one I'd
it's
like to
probably
go
the
to.
closest thing to going to Michigan. It's just, Neyland is huge, and it's on the river, so you've got all these massive boats that are pulling up, and the way that they get to the game is like they dock and they tailgate on their boats prior to the game. It's
Nice.
so cool, dude. So that's another one that's absolutely worthy of your time.
Alabama, Auburn would be good.
I would go to an
Terrible.
LSU game against Texas. I
So you
think
could root
that's
against
gonna,
Quinn Ewers.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be one of the big
You suck, Quinn.
rivalries that's going to exist within the SEC in future seasons. LSU versus Texas, I think, is going to be massive. And I bet you Texas fans will travel well to that game because it's not a crazy difficult trip for those fans to make. You can go down to New Orleans, get yourself up to Baton Rouge, have a good time in New Orleans. That's the kind of game that I would most want to go to, probably. I would obviously love to see Mizzou, but going to an LSU game and getting one of those kinds of games that's got national title implications.
I think the food in Baton Rouge would just be freaking
tailgating,
incredible.
gumbo before the game.
Golly. Ooh, I don't know if I could do gumbo. I'd spend the entire game in the bathroom if I did gumbo.
Man, that's a big tailgate food, man.
Yeah.
Crawfish,
I
gumbo.
understand. Crawfish is different than the gumbo. The gumbo,
Well,
I
you
think.
throw the crawfish in the
No,
gumbo.
you just eat the crawfish. Don't give me the
Suck the
gumbo.
heads?
What?
That's what you do.
That sounds
You can't do that
disgusting.
at a tailgate.
You can. That's
No,
I
literally.
you
don't want
can't.
to see you sucking head while I'm at a tailgate.
Yeah, come on, man.
What?
Come on, man. I am not going to be.
Hold on. I think we're talking about different things.
I don't think we are. I think you said it. T-Bone
That's what you do. You take up.
Hey, give me some, T-Bone. We're out on that,
I'm
BK.
out. I don't want to.
You literally suck the head out.
Yeah,
I don't
you
wanna,
do the head sucking,
that
and
sounds
T-Bone and I are
disgusting.
going to do our own
I'm
tailgating.
going to do the jumbo
Yeah,
or gumbo, whatever it's called.
jumbo.
Jumbo gumbo. That's what I want.
BK's also doing the jumbo.
Yeah. I was in on the whole like trying crawfish
also
thing
eat the
until you
tail.
said that. Oh, I'm out.
You always
Actually,
eat the tail.
I actually think I'm probably actually allergic to crawfish because I'm allergic. Is that
Prove
a
it.
shellfish? It's got to be a shellfish, right?
Yeah, it's a shellfish.
Yeah, I'm out.
I think we try it. My cousin says he's allergic to strawberries, and so we always kind of rub one on him to see if he breaks out in hives. He doesn't. At least I haven't seen it. He says he does when he gets home, but, we don't believe him.
You're a terrible
You're
human
a
being.
bad person.
No, it's fine. It's like it's the Office episode where
Everything's an Office episode.
D'Angelo says he's allergic to peanuts, and Michael comes in with peanut butter sandwiches, and he's throwing them across the room. He's like, "Oh, you got peanut in the air." What are you allergic to, BK?
Not allergic to anything.
Oh, okay.
That I'm aware of, at least.
Well, let's find out.
I think I have some allergies that have developed, as you get older. Pollen.
I'll bring some pollen in the room and see how that handles. I'm allergic to it too, so I don't want to do that.
Yeah, please don't. All right, coming up next.
Got peanut in the air.
Sucking the head and eating the tails.
Man, how I know how BK's tailgating experience goes.
That's why I loved going to Ole Miss. Coming up next.
That's why I heard you. That's why you loved Mizzou.
It's the best way to build around the way that the Cardinals are currently winning their games. I think the starting pitching numbers into their wins can be pretty instructive as to what they need to do at the deadline. Coming up next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, what can the Cardinals learn from how they've been winning games in the first half? Cardinal starters, Alex, this comes from Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, have a 2.1 ERA in their 50 wins so far this year. So when they win, no surprise, this is the case for a lot of teams across Major League Baseball, but the Cardinals, one of them. Their pitching has been really good. Excellent, in fact. 2.1 ERA in their wins so far this year. The Cardinals on the season, I looked this up earlier today, have won just 4 games when their starter gives up more than 4 runs. That tracks when you're giving up a bunch of runs, hard to win. They have only won 10 out of their 50 games this season when their starter gives up more than 3 runs. They're 25-11 so far this year when they get a quality start. 6 innings or more, 3 earned runs or fewer out of their starter that day. 25-11, so like a 665 winning percentage. Alex, when you hear all of that, you think about, okay, so clearly starting pitching has a massive influence on whether or not the Cardinals are getting these wins. And when they get quality pitching, they tend to win. How does that direct your attention at this year's trade deadline if you're the Cardinals?
It means you got to go get an upgrade on your starting pitching staff and add more weapons to your bullpen, because I'd be really curious to see what the bullpen ERA looks like in those 50 wins, because I have to imagine that if your starting pitching is doing that, your offense hasn't been scoring a lot of runs, which means your bullpen's going to have to lock things down the rest of the way. And so what I would look at that as, okay, that tells me as great as they've been, I got to go get another weapon for my rotation so that I can continue this with a guy that provides some swing and miss stuff and can give me more quality starts. Because if I'm 25-11 when I get a quality start, how do I get more of those? So go get a guy who can give you that. And then because your offense has been too inconsistent and not blowing opponents away when your pitching goes well, I got to go get more guys that can relieve some of the pressure off of Romero, Kittredge, and Helsley to win us every single game.
Yeah, I think it shows that you need to play towards your identity, or at least build towards your identity at the trade deadline, which is, okay, our offense, it's had its up and downs this year. It's probably more middle of the pack than anything else. How are we winning games? It's because of our pitching. Well, you want to say that's the starting pitching, which has been really good this season, and you say, okay, let's make Gibson our 3, which is probably where he slots in best at, and you get a 2 that upgrades over him and helps you in the regular season and in October. And I agree. I think you add an arm to your bullpen. I think you're starting to see signs of wear and tear on some of your bullpen arms, like Jojo Romero was not good the final month before the All-Star break. Did not have a lot of swing and miss. Probably looked to upgrade that spot. Andrew Kittredge, I really like him. He's been really good. He's become very split-heavy. He really struggles against left-handed batters. And then you've got Fernandez, so you worry about him because it's his first time at the big league level, and you got Helsley, who's just a stud. I think you continue to add and bolster your rotation and your bullpen and play towards the strength of what your club is, which is, I can't believe I'm saying this, pitching.
I think it's been such a long time since we've seen a Cardinals team that just had like a legitimately good rotation. I mean, it's been since, 2019? Since we've seen like just start to finish, just a good rotation. Not a great one, but a good one where you feel mostly comfortable with all 5 starters that are in the rotation on any given day, that you're not going to get destroyed. That it's a stark reminder for us here in St. Louis that, man, this game, as complicated as it is and as many numbers as there are that get thrown out there, it is pretty simple. If you have a starting pitcher that can go out there and give you at least 6 innings and he gives you a quality start, and then you have a bullpen that is what the Cardinals have had so far this year, where they can lock things down on the back end, and you've got timely hitting, which the Cardinals have not had for a decent portion of the season, especially from Goldie and Arenado, who have been terrible with runners in scoring position this year, especially when it comes to power. If you've got those components, you're going to win a bleep ton of baseball games. And the Cardinals, for the most part this season, when they get good starts, they win those games. So to me, it speaks to 2 different things. One, you need to go out and get one more. Get one more guy that you feel really good about at the front end of your rotation. I heard what Katie said earlier, where she said, hey, they feel pretty good about Sonny and Kyle Gibson, and probably have somebody that they add that slots in behind Kyle Gibson. I would like to have somebody that slots in ahead of Kyle Gibson, but whatever. If they view, hey, Sonny, Kyle Gibson, Yusei Kikuchi, if Kikuchi to them is a 3 instead of a 2, I don't really care how you classify it. Just that guy makes you better. He's in front of Michaelis. He's in front of Lynn. Cool. We can go from there. That's what they need. The other thing they need is for this offense to get better. I think something that you can learn from this is that you've won just 4 games this year when you've given up 4 runs or more by your starting rotation. You should win more than that. You've won only 10 games this year when your starter gives up more than 3. You should have better of a chance than that. It feels like if the Cardinals are going to win within the first 3 innings of the game for the most part. If the pitcher does well, you're probably going to win that game. If the pitcher doesn't, probably going to lose because that's how the offense has operated. They play really well from ahead and really poorly from behind for the most part. So adding to the offense also wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing. It's just hard to do. It's really more about the internal improvement.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think you can add to this offense that makes any difference. Like, you're talking about adding to the offense so that you can start blowing teams out of the water early so you don't have to rely on your bullpen to be so great or your starting pitching to be so perfect. You're relying on Goldie and Arenado to do that. That's the only way you can change that identity, which is why you kind of have to lean in to what's gotten you to this point so that you can push for 90-plus wins. But to do that, you're going to have to go get yourself an upgrade on the starting pitchers who can provide you more quality starts and somebody that you could squint and see using him in a high-leverage situation.
Cardinals back in action tonight. The next 10 days are going to be instrumental in terms of what takes place with the National League wildcard race. Cardinals are a part of that mix. We'll tell you about it next year on 101 ESPN. Alex, there are some interesting schedules as we open up the second half of the season. The Braves, for example, they lead the wild card race right now in the National League. They're opening up, as we know, against the Cardinals. But that's not it. Over the next 10 days, this race is going to get really interesting. The Braves have 3 against St. Louis and then 3 against Cincinnati and then 4 on the road at the New York Mets. All 3 of those teams that they're facing are very much in this wild card race in the National League. Cardinals have 3 against Atlanta, 3 against Pittsburgh, and then, thankfully, 3 against Washington. The teams that I think are ultimately going to decide how the next 10 days go in the National League wildcard race, Alex, the Braves, who I previously mentioned, the Padres, who have 3 against Cleveland, 3 against Washington, and 3 against Baltimore. All of those games are on the road. Pirates, 3 against Philly, 3 against your Cardinals, and then 3 on the road at Arizona. And finally, the Cubs. The Cubs, to me, have a chance to completely fall out of this thing.
I think the Padres do, too.
3 against Arizona, 3 against Milwaukee, 3 on the road at Kansas City. That could be a death trap for the Chicago Cubs coming out of the break. They're about to open up their second half right now. You said you think the Padres have a chance to fall out as well, Alex?
Yeah, I think the Padres are in the same boat as the Cubs, and I know they're not taking on division teams, but I think while the other teams around them pick up wins, I don't know if the Padres come out with more than 1 series win in the next 3.
I just think that their front office is so aggressive that I don't think it would dissuade them from going for it.
Oh, I agree with you. They'll make a trade at the deadline.
I think they could be the type of team that like they win 3 of their next 9 and still believe they're in it because because they're just nuts.
And Luis Robert.
Like, Preller is just a crazy person, and so he's still going to believe in his team, and he's going to keep adding talent. It doesn't have to make sense to any of us, but he's going to be out there saying, I believe in the roster, I believe in the team, I'm going to continue adding talent. So I don't know how much it changes the dynamic at the deadline for them. The teams that have a chance to do that will ultimately determine like the trajectory of this year's deadline, in my opinion, are the Diamondbacks and the Mets. Those are the 2 teams to me in the National League wildcard race that have the biggest, like, could go one way, could go the other, depending on what happens over the next 10 days. Who would you guys pinpoint in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe the Mets and the Diamondbacks are a part of that conversation because I think depending on what the Cardinals do versus the Braves and Pirates, if the Mets, who I believe can win against Miami, Diamondbacks win against the Cubs, you could be talking about being out of a wild card spot after that first series. I think the Pirates can do some as well. If they have success against the Cardinals, Phillies is a tough challenge, but if you're going to have some of those pitchers going into that one, and then Arizona, I think the Pirates can do that also. Those are the 3 teams for me on top of Cardinals and Braves that really make a difference over these next 3 series in terms of where you're sitting in those wild card conversations.
To be honest, I'm not sure I'm really watching the National League here. I think when you look at that, I agree that somebody should fall off. I also said that last month.
Sure.
To where I thought for sure June was the month that historically in the 3-team wildcard era was, hey, these teams separate, you get down to like 5 maybe that are fighting for that spot. And as we've seen, the only team that really fell out of it was Washington. Now, maybe the Cubs end up falling out of it. They're probably, them and the Reds are the 2 that I would circle that have the potential to fall. Everybody else, I think, staying in the race. To me, it's the AL. I'm fascinated to see what happens with the Texas Rangers over the next handful of days because they are the team that we just talked about. If they struggle in their next 10 days, Evaldi, I think they're trading. I think they're going to start to listen on Max Scherzer. Guys that aren't under control suddenly become more interesting for the Texas Rangers because right now they can kind of squint and say we're kind of in this thing. But you've got to leapfrog 4 teams, and Houston and the Royals and the Red Sox should be adding above them.
It's interesting because like they're incentivized to still go for it. They should be trying to win this year. And have you guys looked at what they have coming out in the second half? So they start out with 3 against Baltimore. That's obviously not going to be easy. But after that, they've got a 4-game set against the Chicago White Sox.
Ooh,
if you're the Cardinals, like if you're John Mozeliak and your ideal trade candidate is Nate Evaldi, who I would love to see the Cardinals go get. We haven't talked about him a ton because I don't know if the Texas Rangers are going to deal him, but if they do, that's the guy. He makes all the sense in the world for what the Cardinals should be trying to acquire at the deadline. That 4-game set against the White Sox, like, you got to be kidding me, man. You got that coming out of the break, and then they've got Toronto, who at that point in time is going to be selling off a bunch of pieces. Like, their second half schedule, the way that it sets up, does not help teams like the Cardinals that would like to see them become sellers. The Blue Jays are another team in that scenario where it's like, okay, Detroit, Tampa Bay, Texas, they're all kind of in that same muddled middle. And then you've got the Tigers, who I think are incentivized to sell. I just don't, they're not going to get back into this race in the Central Division. They've got 4 games coming up at Cleveland and then 3 at home against Minnesota, who was really good this year, guys. And then right before the deadline, they've got 2 more against Cleveland again. It's not an easy road for them. I think they're going to be like surefire sellers. That's why I think Flaherty is definitely getting moved. I think the Rangers and the Blue Jays are the 2 teams that ultimately determine what this deadline is in terms of activity.
And I think you're only talking about one person from the Blue Jays. I think you're talking about Kikuchi, and that's it. Like, at least some of these other teams, there's multiple pieces you can trade for.
They've got other guys that are interesting for non-Cardinals related reasons.
Exactly. But
for the Cardinals, he's really the
But I don't know if they're going to trade Guerrero Jr., and I don't know if they're going to trade Bichette,
so.
But you're talking about some other pieces.
Danny Jansen could get traded. He's the kind of guy that could
But it sure seems like everybody, at least a lot of these contenders, are going to be looking on the starting pitching market. And so, like, that's why the Blue Jays, unless you're going to pay the price to get Kikuchi, which is going to be a bidding war, it seems, you're probably going to be better off looking at other teams like the White Sox, or if the Rangers do hit sell mode, of looking to trade for their pieces because there's multiple guys you can talk about.
You guys want to hear something that I was told the other day about the Blue Jays?
They stink?
No.
They're in Toronto?
So I was told by somebody that if a team is willing to take on the contract from George Springer, you could basically get anybody from the Blue Jays right now.
Oh.
Like they view the George Springer contract as detrimental to what they want to be as a team. He's got 2 years left at $24 million per season.
Hey, that's a right-hitting outfielder.
It is. It's a ton of money for what he is at this point in his career. He's essentially a platoon bat where he's okay against left-handed pitching, but he's pretty good defensively. Can play kind of anywhere for you if you want in the outfield.
2 years removed from having a 132 OPS plus.
1100. Yeah. I mean, he's amazing. It was amazing previously.
That goes quick.
Not that same guy anymore. Mostly playing in right field at this point.
So what are you trying to get at?
The reason I bring this up, I don't think the Cardinals would do it because I don't think they're adding that kind of money to the next 2 years. They could, because this is essentially replacing the Goldie slot on your salary sheet. Would you consider it if it meant them trading something significant to you?
What would be significant? Because I don't know if they have pitching that's significant enough to you. Like if Alek Manoah was pitching like a Cy Young candidate, yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, Kevin Gausman doesn't warrant me going to pay that money for a platoon bat. I don't think Kikuchi warrants me to go get that platoon bat.
If that got you Guerrero.
No.
Because I mean, that's just too much salary, probably.
And like,
Bichette might be a little bit more interesting.
But that's the kind of thing I could see a team like the Dodgers
don't, but could you flip Gorman in the offseason to get a pitcher?
Maybe, but I don't know if Bichette really wants to play second. So if that's the case, he may just say, fine, I'll do my 1 year and then I'll leave.
Sure.
He's going to want the shortstop money. Why? Because that's a prime position. Like, it doesn't make any sense
that feels
for
very
Toronto.
Dodgersy.
Yeah, it does. But
like
they'd
they
have to be
trade
adding
for
significant.
Springer, and then they get Bichette, who can play shortstop or second, depending on what they need. And it's basically for them what the deal was when they got Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. And they're saying, we're going to figure this out over the next couple of years.
It sucks that it's the Blue Jays because, like, if that was the White Sox where you had to take on a massive contract so you could get Garrett Crochet, it's like, oh, man, I'd be on board with that one.
It sucks that it's the Blue Jays. Remember where they were like, hey, if you take on Patrick Corbin, we'll take less for Juan Soto.
I was all aboard the Patrick Corbin train.
And that's what stinks is, like, when you look at Toronto, in theory, I can understand why you would try and get to that conclusion. Problem is you don't have any like young cost control pitching on their team, because if you add Springer's like $25 million, well, sure, I like Bassett and I like Gausman a little bit more than Kikuchi, but those guys are making $20 million too. So I'm adding $40 million in salary for the next handful of years. That just doesn't make sense for the Cardinals.
How confident are you could fix Alek Manoah?
Not at all.
And you don't need to take on that kind of money to be able to do that. But I just thought it was an interesting potential rumor that was floated to me the other day. By somebody, and it was in conversations about a different team and what they could do at the deadline. But it was just something that I thought would be interesting.
Too bad Toronto has crappy pitching, because otherwise I'd be all in.
I know. It would be a lot of fun. It's probably, you know how these things go, right? At the deadline, like 90% of what you hear isn't going to actually happen. But
Tell the Blue Jays to trade for Max Scherzer, and then we'll take Max Scherzer and George Springer.
Three-way deal?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in.
I don't know why not?
If they had like a Garrett Crochet, that's what it becomes interesting. Or a Scooble, or like one of those front end.
If they had like if Eric Fetty signed that 2-year deal with Toronto, would you do it?
I think I need more. I'd need more.
Be a lot of salaries.
I need more than Eric Fetty.
Like Fetty with Springer?
Yeah.
Again, I don't think I need to take on that kind of salary. Like I could trade for Eric Fetty without it.
Yeah,
it's got to be a legit
Garrett
number
Crochet.
one. It's got to be a number one. If Crochet had 1 year left of control, that's probably the type of move that you're talking about. Him having 2.5 years throws a wrench into all of this. As we get closer to the deadline, I just don't think it's going to be all that active. I don't think Crochet is getting moved at the deadline.
Texas is the team for me that swings the pendulum, because if they're not going to be buyers, I wouldn't be shocked if Scherzer does waive his no trade, because he's got like maybe another year at best in the tank. So why, if you're him, would you not say, okay, I'll waive my no trade to go try win a World Series? Nate Eovaldi would bring back a haul because he's a stud.
I think Max Scherzer's waiving it for probably one team to where he feels like he could win a World Series, and it would be like Philadelphia.
Oh, that would be fun.
Sure as hell ain't waving it for the Dodgers, I'll tell you that much.
Sure as hell ain't waving it for the Cardinals.
I don't know, man.
You don't got a shot to win a World Series with them. If you're Max Scherzer, that's the lone goal
if you're
of
Max
waiving
Scherzer,
your no trade.
I could see how Max Scherzer says to himself, I'm the guy that helps them win a World Series.
Exactly.
Because I think a lot of people on the outside would go, man, they just took a huge risk on an old guy that could be hurt by October. If I'm Max Scherzer, the belief for Max Scherzer is I want to go where I would want to play, and I would think probably St. Louis would be on that list since he's from the area.
I also see that offense if I'm Max Scherzer and say pitching's not going to make that finish.
You know what he does? He says, okay, so they got Goldie, they got Arenado, and they got a bunch of young dudes that are hitting right now, and they're adding me to the mix with Sonny Gray. I know Kyle Gibson. That could work. And they've got Ryan Helsley at the back end of the bull. I think T-Bone's right. Like, players are irrationally confident, but they're that way for a reason. Max Scherzer especially, like, a lot of it is rational. When that dude is on his game and he's healthy, he's one of the best pitchers we've ever seen. So he probably looks at it and says, between me and Sonny Gray, we've got a 1-2 combo similar to what the Phillies had. And if you look at the back end of the bullpen, that's similar to what a lot of other contenders have had. If Goldie and Arenado start to hit, this team can win the World Series.
It would be a better rotation with Max Scherzer, Sonny Gray than what the Rangers had to win the World Series last year. Like, think of that. Their 1-2 was Eovaldi and Montgomery. If I told you I can get the right version of Max Scherzer with Sonny Gray, I'd 100% take that over Montgomery and Eovaldi.
A lot of people are texting in saying what you had mentioned previously, Alex, and this is, I promise this is not me scolding. I have a tone problem, and so I'm going to try to say this as politely as I can.
No.
When Max Scherzer said that he would not accept a trade, he would not waive his no-trade clause. I'm going to compare this to politics. I promise you we're not getting political here. Joe Biden cannot say that he's considering getting out of the race until he officially does it, because otherwise it promotes a sign of weakness, and it essentially ends his campaign by even admitting that he's considering getting out of the campaign. The same is true essentially for Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer has to say until he is ready to be moved at the deadline, or until the Texas Rangers come to him with a specific trade of where he can go, I'm not waiving my no-trade clause. Otherwise, he loses all of his leverage. Because if he goes to the Rangers and says, hey, I'm willing to waive my no-trade clause, now they're going to start looking out there at what's available to him. If instead he waits for them to come to him with the deal that's in place, then he can decide in the moment, okay, yeah, I'm willing to go there, I'm willing to go there, I'm not willing to go there. So that's, in my opinion, that's the way he will and should operate. He's also very involved with the MLBPA. And he's a guy that's very, like, pro-union, pro-player rights. And so him having the no-trade clause in his contract is a meaningful thing to him, and he wants to be able to exercise that right at the trade deadline, as he should. That is a part of his contract. He deserves that. He earned that. But I think that's something to keep in mind. If you hear a player around this time of the year asked if they would be willing to waive their no-trade clause, almost all of them will tell you no. And then it comes down to, okay, it's time. Are you willing to go to X, Y, or Z? Then the player will give you their honest answer. But that's really not for another couple of weeks. You got to ask the question. Foul territory was correct in doing so. Max Scherzer did his part, and then we all go our way. And 2 weeks from now, we'll find out the truth.
I'm proud of you, man. That was a really good way of working around having a tone problem.
Thanks, man. I'm trying. I'm doing my best.
Give it time until the next segment, then he'll come back with another
one. It
one.
only took him 4 years.
I don't give you that much credit.
9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for One's Gotta Go. Read a little bit less into it next time. You'll be better off for it. One's Gotta Go next.
There it is.
Tara Hendricks here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Soliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals start the second half of the season tonight as they start a 3-game set at the Atlanta Braves. 6:20 will be first pitch. Sonny Gray will be on the mound for St. Louis. If you want to check out the Cardinals line, you can do so on our Twitter page at 101 ESPN. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Soliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for One's Gotta Go. You give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's got to go here on BK and Ferrario. Let's start out with this. One's Gotta Go Mizzou wide receiver edition. T-Bone, I don't know if you'll know some of these guys.
Whoa, you got any better?
Super familiar.
No.
So if you don't want to get in on this, totally fine. Denario Alexander, Jeremy Maclin, Luther Burden, Justin Gage. Alex, which one's got to go? I'll start if you guys don't mind.
It comes down to me, Gage or Alexander.
Denario had one of the best offensive seasons I've ever seen by a Mizzou football player. It goes underrated, but Denario's he was unbelievable. I love Justin Gage. I think he is a criminally underrated Mizzou football player. Those other 3 guys, Burden, Maclin, Alexander, are 3 of the best football players that I've seen at Mizzou. So it's got to be Justin Gage to me. That's no shot at him. These are the right guys to have involved with this, but I would go Justin Gage as the one that's got to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's Alexander or Gage because Maclin was my childhood, and then Luther Burden. I mean, we're talking about seeing something with Luther Burden this year that we haven't seen in a long time. So I think I'm with you. I think I would go Gage over Alexander because I have more Denario Alexander moments than Justin Gage moments.
Yeah, I don't know 2 of those guys. I'll keep Maclin and Burden.
You should get rid of one of Maclin or Burden.
You know what? Bird's not proven enough. He's only done it for really a year, if we're being honest. He was okay his freshman year, but he only did a year. Burden gets the hell out.
Coaching malpractice his first year.
I won't lie. I saw Burden versus South Carolina last year. Oh, my God.
Eli Drinkwitz used Luther Burden in his first year the same way that Dan Campbell used Jahmyr Gibbs this past year.
Listen to this. This was Denario Alexander's 2009 season.
Oh, I shouldn't know this.
113 receptions.
Jeez.
1,780 yards.
Wow.
And 14 touchdogs.
Who was the
He was a beast.
Was that
he was a
Daniel?
beast.
That was at that point I think Blaine Gabbert.
Dude was dude was 6'5", like 200 something pounds.
Did he
too.
do anything in the NFL?
His knees exploded.
He was with the Chargers, wasn't
it? Chargers and Rams. If his knees didn't explode, he was so good.
14 touchdowns.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for One's Gotta Go.
You can't recruit him.
One's Gotta Go. This is only 2 of them.
Whoa.
Dom's projection system for contracts or Baseball Prospectus's Pacoda system. Dom, Pacoda. Which one's got to go?
I'll go Dom's because Pacoda's at least around the area. Dom's is just complete trash.
Yeah.
Pacoda always underestimates the Cardinals, but we've had the Pacoda guy on, the one that is like in charge of putting this data out, and he writes the article and everything. He's like, yeah, we know that we underrate the Cardinals because they do stuff that a projection system is never going to like because they rely on defense and ground ball pitchers, and that's just really hard to expect to work every year. And then last year it didn't. Yeah. And they're like, we finally got it right. Yeah. So
Dom saying that Colton Parayko's contract is worth $2.5 million is just complete trash.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I get how both systems get to where they did. Like, I understand how Dom's model would value Parayko that way. But at some point, like you also, when you write that article, I get what the model says. At some point, you also have to go by the eye test as well.
All right, one's got to go summer water edition. Ocean, lake, river, or pool?
Ocean. Lake's fine. I mean, honestly, it's either ocean or river, and I don't like either of them because some type of thing underneath me is going to ruin my life, whether it's a snake or a shark. So
for me, it's lake.
Can't it be said anywhere?
Huh?
Well, not a pool, but can't it be said about like a river or a lake?
Yeah, I don't know if you see a lot of snakes in the lake.
If I'm going to the ocean, chances are I'll be in the pool. but I'm overlooking the ocean. The ocean's beautiful. I love the waves coming in, crashing in. You probably got good weather. Like, that's fantastic. If I'm going to the river, chances are I'm probably going on a float trip. Sounds great. Getting hammered for the day, going down the river, camping that night, great.
Oh, that sounds
awful. If I'm going to the pool, like, sweet. Family time, cookout, all that.
The lake, you're going to go on a boat, probably tubing, and get hammered. Yeah. What's the problem?
I would rather do the other three things.
I would get rid of river because you said camping, and I am so out on that.
Yeah.
So
I'm out on the river.
I mean, you're so drunk by the time that
I could do that on all the other ones. And
by the time that I get
got a
home
problem,
that night,
buddy.
That like,
damn,
you just fall asleep somewhere. You wake up in the morning and drive home.
Oh yeah, that's how you get some type of possum eating like your left toe while you're sleeping,
dude. So when I was getting my haircut the other day, when I was getting my haircut the other day, speaking of camping stories,
possum with a toe fetish.
The girl that cuts my hair was talking about her experience camping recently. She said, so it started out where my two kids got sick. They both had like a 24-hour flu bug, so they were like throwing up. They'd be fine, and then they would throw up, and then they'd be fine again. So that was the starting point. And then it started raining that night, and it like broke a hole in the top of their tent. So they had to use like an inflatable mattress to put on top of them, and then one of the other kids that got sick
that sounds
threw up on the air mattress.
And welcome to Exhibit A, B, C, and D. Why I don't camp.
Flooding in their tent while a kid's getting sick. I was like, oh, that sounds brutal.
I wouldn't mind doing camping, but I don't want to do camping and like sleeping in a tent. I want to be like camping like at a cabin.
You know how I camp?
That's what I would want
to do.
A red
roof in. The chance of bed bugs is how I camp.
Get yourself an RV. My dad's got one. That's what we do.
Or an RV. That would be good, too.
Would love to do that one.
All right. From the 636, one's got to go Chips Edition. Barbecue, sour cream, and onion, jalapeno cheddar, or salt and vinegar.
Ooh.
Barbecue, sour cream and onion, jalapeno cheddar, or salt and vinegar.
We'll go sour cream and onion because you can't come back from that bad breath after you eat it.
They are gross.
I don't mind them.
Easily the worst. The singular worst flavor of chip.
Oh no, see, original is the worst
flavor. Sour cream and onion is disgusting.
True.
I will house some original potato chips.
No, that's disgusting. You can't come back from sour cream and onions. Once you eat that, you're talking about the rest of your night having bad breath. Yeah. No, breath mints don't even kill that. It's just there until you brush heavily when you get home.
I'm getting rid of the jalapeno cheddar ones.
Oh,
just
I love those.
I don't really like. I like them, but I don't know. I typically don't want like a spicy chip with my meal. You know, I just don't. I think I'm getting rid of that.
A little spice in your life, man.
Have you ever had the kettle cooked jalapeno chips?
Oh man, those are the best. They have them at Aldi's and they're like $1.50 when you buy them. I buy all kinds of them.
For whatever reason, like I don't want spice on my chips.
Let me tell you what are even better: garden salsa, sun chips.
Those are good.
Okay.
Those are good.
My God,
I'll eat those.
Some good stuff.
Like if they have those at a cookout, we're at a pool, we got a cookout going. There's some sun chips over here.
You're blasted. You don't know where you fell asleep.
I'm definitely in the best scenario. Dude, you know what else is really good when you like get home, you get back to the campsite after a really long day on the river. It's just a really good brat.
Oh yeah.
Just cook that thing over the open fire.
That's how it is. How it is when you golf, man. When you're drinking on the first nine, that turn dog. Let me tell you something. Nothing hits the spot better than a turn dog.
What, if you're going on a float trip, Alex?
I wouldn't go on a float trip, but if I was, go ahead.
Absolutely would. First of all, we were told, by the way, that we cannot do one with a station.
Yeah, apparently somebody died on one, so
not
makes
funny.
sense.
Not a
no,
funny
not funny
thing.
at all. I'm just saying you can't go on one.
Correct. Yeah, that is partially why. Apparently, insurance is really hard to get for those. I can't imagine why. But
I just said,
if you're going on a float trip, what are you drinking? What are you bringing with you?
Seltzers. I'm pounding seltzers that entire trip. I'm probably pre-gaming the seltzers before I get in the water, so I don't, because I'll have anxiety the whole time that there are snakes underneath me.
If
so
you're
I have
going
to pregame
on a float trip and somebody brings a handle of tequila with them,
that guy's a partier. I like the way that guy thinks.
Wow.
Or gal.
I'm in.
Oh man!
See, I think my go-to.
You roll up with some tequila or vodka.
I love
party.
When I go back home and we're on the boat, we're just like chilling in the lake, float. I love a good summer shandy.
Only has a lake.
Yeah. Two.
Yeah, it's right next to the soda shop. It goes right past it.
That's not Main Street.
all the sewage goes into it as well.
Oh, that's not nice.
Yeah. Hey, don't talk about my lake that way.
What's your go-to?
The summer shandy.
Oh,
a little lemon.
You're drinking summer shandy for hours on end? Multiple?
That's awful, man.
Yeah.
T-Bone's got like 8 summer shandies in and just puking on the side of the river.
Seltzers were bad.
I'm not.
That's disgusting.
I can handle my liquor. Okay.
Somebody rolls up with just a entire flask of Crown Royal. You know it's going to be a good float trip.
Dude, some people, that's how they roll. There's some people that they get there and they're like, I've got a handle of this. This is what I'm going to be drinking over the course of the day. I'll just take pulls all day long. I'm just drink straight out of the bottle just all day.
I can't compete with those people.
I don't have that in me. I run a lot. I'm the marathon of drinking like that. I don't have that muscle in me.
I thought I did until I did my golf trip.
Bush Light, some kind of light beer is typically bring a 24 rack. Let's go.
Just give me some Bud Light, seltzers, lime. I'll just pound those the entire trip.
Again, too sugary, too much sugar.
Man. Not when you keep chugging them.
Coming up next, we'll hit the rewind here on 101 ESPN. Hey, the Fast Lane squaring off once again against the Rizzuto Show for 105.7 The Point. And this year's softball home run derby, that is taking place tomorrow in O'Fallon, Missouri at the Car Shield Field. There's also going to be a fast pitch home run derby that night featuring Rick Ankiel and Brian Jordan. GA tickets.
That's not tomorrow, man. It's next Saturday.
Don't show up tomorrow. Definitely wait another week.
I had to look up and be like, wait a minute, July 27th, that is not tomorrow.
Man, if you just play this, T-Bone, like record this, play it next Friday, it'd be a perfect outro to our show.
Not this part.
Yeah, cut this part out.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
GA tickets are on sale now. That part is true. They're just $15.
I'll see you there tonight, T-Bone.
You can find all the details that are 100% accurate on what I'm telling you about at 101ESPN.com. Nothing I just told you is true other than that.
Yeah, that has the exact date.
And that's all presented by Swiss Air Heating and Cooling, Faster House, and by Zwickle Light.
Thanks, all our sponsors, for that.
Does your copy say tomorrow?
No, BK just got really confident in himself that he knew what the date was.
Change. I just assumed, hey, you read this. It says on here one time per show, 7:15 to 7:19, and it does specifically say Saturday, July 27th, and in my mind, that's tomorrow.
That was a tone problem by Tanner. Tanner had a tone problem there.
No, I was like genuine curious.
Fair question.
Because I could see where the copy says tomorrow.
I'm not deflecting. Yeah. I screwed up. That's all.
There's a first. He never does that.
That one was on me. That's next weekend.
I just can't wait to see you guys there tonight.
Somebody's ready for the weekend.
That is 100% true. All right, so the Cardinals are back in action tonight. They're going to be taking on the Atlanta Braves. They've got their rotation set up the way that they want to. Alex, how many do they take this weekend? 3 games set in Atlanta. How many do they get?
1 of 3. Sonny Gray start tonight.
Yep.
And I think they lose the Gibson and Michaelis one.
2 out of 3, in my opinion.
I think it'll probably be 1 out of 3.
I think they win the next 2, lose on Sunday.
I'm
one of them's an extras.
The player I'm circling this weekend that I'm really keeping an eye on, and I know everybody's going to say Goldie Arenado because somehow the Cardinals think that'll change their deadline plans, is Gibson. Gibson really struggled in the last 4 starts and has historically struggled in the second half. So he's the guy that, with a little rest now, all right, let's see what you look like against the Braves.
They are on the road, though. You know what that means. You're sleeping in a hotel bed.
Oh, there's so going to be a back.
Watch out for the bad backs.
Oh, yeah. Somebody's going to have one this weekend.
To me, the guy that I'm watching for is Lars Nootbaar. He is, to me,
He's
always a second-half player. Want to see what the offensive production looks like for him. Their offense, by the way, has started to improve a little bit. You've seen Austin Riley is batting .298 with an OPS of 1,000 in the month of July. So he's starting to heat up. Ozuna's been amazing. D'Arnaud has been really good. Matt Olson still has no idea how to hit in the month of July. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk about all of that and so much more on Monday at 11 a.m. Have a great weekend. St. Louis, the Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.